what do you guys think about that? What do you think are the major beliefs that people have in terms of where the problems in this world stem from? What would y'all say? Like if you were kind of playing devil's advocate, so to speak.
I think most people right now think the problems stem from racism, and it's like a systemic racism. And I think a lot of people have maybe even like a personal experience with that, with some point within that. And so it's very emotionally charged for them. And so I'm just considering this because I've had a few conversations this past week with different people about it. And some people are more willing than others to consider things. But generally speaking, when someone is speaking from the perspective of this happened to me, it's like you have to accept that this is my truth, so to speak.
Okay. I mean, that's a pretty big one right now.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Should we all give our points and then hit on those in the discussion?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you guys want to, yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of people see that human nature is, they think it's unchangeable. Like that's just the way people are. People don't really change. So there's just this cynicism toward any sort of, way of looking at like really changing like the economic system, things like that.
It's like, remember when we were talking about feelings versus principles, right? And Cameron was making this point that there's like fundamental axioms that we all accept, and we create a bunch of beliefs, opinions off of that. And when those create consequences that we don't want, we don't go back to the beliefs or the principles. We just kind of look at how we can just apply new beliefs or solutions to solve those problems. So we implement something, it creates a bunch of problems that we couldn't see before because everybody's so specialized and they're not communicating with each other, which we've talked about in other podcasts. And the problem is that everyone's been programmed of not just the country you live in or not just the system you live in, like reality functions like this. The reality is, that's what people say. The reality is there's poor people in the world. The reality is there's homeless. The reality is, there's always going to be people raping and killing and all that stuff. And so it's so much easier to just accept that and then build your life with that starting assumption, because then you don't have to go through all the cognitive dissonance of, I think I'm a good person, but I'm not doing anything about all this abuse that's going on in the world because can't change it. All I can do is, if somebody's abusing me, I know that's real. So I'll make sure I change that. But the problem is, at the end of the day, all the economists, all the accountants, the lawyers, all of the doctors, think about how many people's lives are that. And that is based on, everybody's life is based on the system that we live in. And if we change the system that we live in, they lose everything that they know. We all lose everything that we know. And only the people who are confident in their adaptability are okay with that. How many people is that?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's interesting too. I was just thinking about what you were saying about with the doctors being kind of, just as one example of, if we change the system, they lose what they have. It's like, let's just look at the starting point of being a doctor. Why is it that doctors get paid so much? What do you think the normal argument is?
Because they're saving human lives.
They have to know a lot.
But police don't get paid very much.
Oh, that's true.
Or okay, if that's a charged topic, what about EMTs?
Yeah, okay, that's true.
And teachers don't get paid very much, right? So I know it's not the same thing, but
yeah.
It's because they have to go through so much schooling and it takes all this time, all this investment.
That's true. But I mean, also, like, if you want to be the superintendent of a school district, a lot of times these people have like PhDs and so forth, and they're not getting paid like a doctor is.
Okay. Fair.
And I mean, what does it cost to be a PhD mathematician? Now, that being said, a lot of times in the hard sciences, people get paid to go to grad school and so forth. So that doesn't mean every mathematician's necessarily paying for that, but it does cost money. Like somebody has to pay it, even if it's a grant or whatever. What?
I was thinking it's because they know fundamentally. Man, okay. One cool point. I'll bring it back to this topic.
Okay.
But Century of Self, right? Rewatching it with Maylat, we watched the first part.
That's the Adam Curtis documentary.
Yeah, the Century of Self. It's on YouTube, 4 parts, and I think the first part is called The Happiness Machine. And the point is, this idea that I thought human beings were born with. We're always going to want more, right? That's what everybody says. Guys, you can't have a system, blah, blah, blah. We're always going to want more. All humans do is they want more. That's something that was invented like not that long ago. That idea, guys, whoever's listening to this, if you haven't watched The Century of Self Part 1, it talks about how there was a time not too long ago when human beings didn't always want more. And it was a problem for companies because companies or production needs consumption. And there was no consumption. They were just producing a bunch of stuff and like, oh crap, who are we going to consume? Who's going to consume it? So then they're like, hey, Sigmund Freud's nephew, Edward Bernays, you seem pretty smart. He's like, yeah, I'm pretty smart. They're like, how smart are you? He's like, well, I could manipulate everyone into becoming consumers. They're like, okay, show us. And he does it. And now that's who we are today. And so that concept of being applied to doctors is like, fundamentally, we know that the more money I give you, the more money you're going to spend. And the part that I was thinking of is one aspect of it. Because I want to hear exactly what you have to say, Cameron, as well. But it's like, we pay you so much so that you'll never question anything. And part of that is so that, like, why would you question things when you're getting paid so much? And the purpose of life is to consume. The purpose of life is to make money. And off of making a lot, you end up getting yourself into a lot more debt. So if you were to question things and you lose that livelihood, you're completely screwed.
Because it's not like they are necessarily having investments and, you know, running a business where they can just sit back and not have to work anymore. They have to continue to work to get their salary, basically.
Right.
But a lot of it is also inflated by drug prices and the cost of medical equipment and procedures and so forth. So it's almost like, if you think about the drug companies, let's say, would want us to believe that doctors should be paid more because that would justify why something like a drug costs $500 a pill or something like that. You know what I mean? Because it's not even necessarily going to the doctor. I don't know what percentages they necessarily get on stuff like that, or if they do at all. I don't know how that exactly works, but it would justify just the idea that things in medicine are a lot, you know, even though it should be the thing that is a human basic right, you know, it should be. Yeah. And it's weird because don't people think like doctors are sort of altruistic?
Yeah.
Like, isn't there sort of that connotation of that? But it's like, but by the definition of how much they get paid, they're the greediest of all people. As a group, not necessarily on an individual basis, but as a group, they would be the greediest people because they're making the most money. And why does it matter how much time they put into it? You know, and I know people will go to the communism side, which is like, so then just pay everyone exactly the same. They get paid the same as a McDonald's worker, huh? Is that what you're trying to say? And it's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. Right. But the other thing I was looking at too is with the Edward Bernays point, kind of shift gears back to that. In the documentary, they explain, so this is the controversial hot take, okay? Women's liberation is just a brainwashing program to create more consumers. But that documentary explains it. Right? How they used like these persuasion techniques to get women. So as part of liberation movement points, they also then got women to start smoking, and they tied it to them being free. They called them freedom sticks. Yeah. That's how they got more women
freedom
smoking.
Torches.
Freedom torches. That's right. Yeah, right. Freedom torches. Yeah,
like the statue. The things they tied it to. But they were saying the starting point was for cigarette companies. Hey, wait, only 50% of our population are men. That means we're missing 50% of our customers, our market. Yeah, if women are smoking.
So you had to get women thinking, oh, I'm not equal to men because they're able to do something I can't do or whatever, right? Which obviously, if there's points in society where a man or woman or anybody feels that they're not allowed to do something simply because they're a particular gender, race, whatever it is, that doesn't make sense. Right? We should challenge those points.
Like, why does it have to be written into law?
Right. Like, why can only a man smoke? Like, right. But at the same time, you then have to be really self-honest about the differences between a man and a woman. And are there differences in terms of, generally speaking, what a woman is capable of versus what a man is capable of? Because a man can't give birth. A man can't breastfeed. So it makes more sense, on generally speaking, to have the woman being with the children initially, at least in the first 3 to 5 years, primarily, as opposed to the man when possible. If you have and we talked about this, I think, last time too, but it's like, if you have a situation where the child has no choice, meaning they're in an orphanage, and then you have a couple where there's no mother, like female mother involved, woman, then would it be best for the child to sit in the orphanage? No. Right. So I'm not saying, oh, you should just deny people the right to adopt or something like that, but we're just talking about what's best, which should always be done from a point of choosing it, not being forced to do it. But then, of course, what you choose is influenced by media, propaganda, education, and so forth, which is why, again, there's such a big push back against like the LGBT trans activism point that's becoming so widespread within schools. It's not because, like, let's say personally, I have a problem if a man is gay or a woman is gay or whatever. But when you're trying to influence how children think about it so that they will be, quote, more accepting later of that lifestyle or whatever it is, well, now you're looking at the area of actually harming children because they wouldn't necessarily have considered that thing. So whereas you will have a certain percentage of the population that, in terms of their hard wiring, is gay, you'll also have a larger percentage that, due to the influence of environment, will become gay, and it'll become a part of their hard wiring or their programming, let's say, after the fact. You see what I'm saying? So you can be influenced into something in terms of what is programmed into you in the first 7 years of your life, in addition to whatever your genetic hard wiring or any of that is. Just like if you experience sexual abuse or trauma, you could become a sexual abuser. You weren't necessarily hardwired like that, although there are people who are born with a hard wiring where, even in a good environment, they're still going to do something like that, right? Just because of their physical hard wiring, right? But going back to the women's liberation point, even the word women's liberation is a very loaded term. And I'm using that because that's what people refer to it as.
Yeah.
They weren't being liberated, right? They were actually being brainwashed into being consumers.
Being funneled.
Because when you now have the point where a woman feels like it's actually bad, it's actually demeaning for her to stay home with her kids and basically run the household in a nuclear family sort of situation, then you now have people who will deliberately choose against it, even though they would have been very good at it and found a lot of fulfillment and self-expression within it. But to go to the point you were making, Asif, about the consumerism point, how can we have more people in the marketplace buying our products if only 50% of the population has a job? So if you can convince them that, no, your freedom is in getting a job, that means you can sell more products. So when you look at the statistics, home prices, real estate kind of stuff went up, a lot of the prices increase and so forth, right? And then they'll always say it's inflation or something.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a good point. Wow.
But at the same time as all of that, that's when the Federal Reserve points occurred. That's when schooling became compulsory across the board. Public education system became more prevalent. You see what I mean? So all of these points sort of came online at the same time. So it's really cool. So I can talk about that stuff like in an individual basis, but the average person, and it's not because I'm smarter, it's just because of the context. I can talk about that, and to me it's obvious, but that's why that documentary is really good to watch, because you get more context and you're like, wow, a lot, not realizing the way it was framed to you in your education was deliberate, so you'll accept it as a good thing and never question it.
That's a really good point.
So when you watch that documentary, it's like, whoa, it really puts it puts everything into a totally different perspective.
Yeah.
You know,
this is a really cool point, because I was literally just talking about this with someone yesterday, where she was saying, she doesn't believe that a woman should have to stay home with their kids. And we were looking at like, well, okay, from a practical biological standpoint, like who bears the child, right? And then even going further than that, okay, who's more well equipped to take care of the child? And with this particular person, her challenge was that she liked the upbringing that her father gave her better than her mother, or she liked being around her father better
That's the
than
first thing
being
that you
around her
said
mother.
about the personal experience thing.
Exactly. And so for her, it was very very emotionally charged to say, well, yeah, a mother should stay home, because for her it was like, well, I didn't like my mom.
Yeah, if my mom was home, then
Yeah, if it was just my mom home, I wouldn't have had a good childhood or a good upbringing. And so maybe the father should stay home. But it's also going back to that point of practicality of all things being equal, right? Where we're talking about, okay, the mother is going to have to be emotionally stable, just as emotionally stable as the father, and if both of them are walking their process, doing the things that we're suggesting here in Self-Perfected, right? Where they're not holding on to these emotional states from their past, and they're actually investigating themselves and things like that, then clearly the mother is better suited to take care of the kids, at least in the first 3-5 years, like you mentioned, and then
but then also it's like, what would that person rather be doing with their time?
working.
that person that I was talking to,
Or no, I just meant generally. So obviously you can't speak for that person unless you just know because you talked about it. But I'm saying
we
generally
talked about it.
speaking,
They'd rather,
so what would they rather be doing?
They'd rather have a job, not have kids, and not raise kids. They'd rather like build a career or something like that.
Yeah, or have the freedom to go explore the world,
Right.
or find themselves, something like that. I've heard that a lot.
But it's like the idea of having a career. I'm just telling you guys, I don't see it like that for myself. I don't see it as I have a career.
Dude, when I was a boy last year, a couple of years ago, dude, it was only like a couple years ago, like maybe 3 years ago, that I was like, oh, fuck, I actually have to work in this world. I actually have to go work in this world to make money. And if I don't, then my life will suck. Anyways, please continue with your point.
No, what were we? Why'd you bring that up?
If I had the option to get really good at courting the other sex, and they would just take care of everything for me, I would just find the smartest motherfucker, take care of all of the shit, make sure all his shit is taken care of, so that he would just, I get free ride, baby. Like, I'm just saying. Like, are you kidding?
Well, it's like, okay, here's my perspective on this. I think there is
maybe that's just me.
No, I think it makes sense what you're saying. Like, in other words, if you could just have everything taken care of where you don't have to work to survive, what would the context of your career be then?
Passion, not passion, but like what you want to do.
But then it's like, let's look at, okay, well, what's the influence of your environment and all the cultural programming and everything around what you think is important to do? Really, none of us, anyone, has any clue what they would want to do in a world where you don't have to survive. Meaning your survival is guaranteed as long as you don't, accidentally some boulder falls on you, or you don't trip and fall down a cliff or something. You know what I mean? Like something.
You've been watching too many cartoons, dude.
An anvil falls from the sky.
Who painted this tunnel on this rock here? No, but it's so, like, what I mean?
You have the
other than an accident.
Yeah, because then you have one thing I was trying to rectify in my brain was like, I don't think it's very fair in the context of the world that we live in for painters to just be painters and musicians to just be musicians. And the reason I say that is because it doesn't make sense to have that in a world where like people around you can't eat. But just because it's not physically around you, it's like you can't see it, then you can live your life doing whatever you want to do. But not everybody has that option.
But then the argument would be that you can have the balance of the positive, beautiful creation part that balances out the negative part. right? Which I know is not valid. I'm just saying that would be the argument, right? That, well, but we have to have someone who creates the beauty and all that stuff, and it makes life worth living. It's like, really, what life is worth living because you can look at a painting, like that should be like an extra. That, you know what I mean? That should just be like, oh, cool, I also get to do that. But that's not the essence of what your life is about, you know. But too many times we place these superficial things above. And so, in other words, what makes really good art in terms of the context of our system is when the person really fucking struggles mentally. Isn't it? Isn't that with the best artists? Like, why do people like Van Gogh? I'm not saying it's because he was mentally ill, but that was part of what drove him.
Or like a blind, or like Stevie Wonder. Well, he like, you know, he makes good music. A lot of people make good music, but dude's blind.
Right. It's a part of his expression, right? And especially with things like visual art, like painting and so forth, a lot of people are like very tormented, and music artists and so forth, right? And I know, because when I was younger in college, I was very internally tormented, and I was doing a lot of music and things like that, a lot of art and self-expression type stuff, because I was trying to find an outlet for. It's not even so much the way I was feeling; it was a way of feeling good. It was a way of finding something that would make me feel alive, because internally it was so challenging and so difficult and everything, right? And so the art is more of a coping mechanism in a negative sense than it is an actual expression of anything. And I think the reason why people get so emotional about it is because they can relate to that point of struggle at some level, some kind of maybe subconscious or unconscious level. And so it's sort of, oh, look, there's beauty in our misery. And it's a product of our misery. Our misery has meaning. Our suffering has meaning.
Yeah, I probably
instead of looking at how we could solve that. And then in that context, maybe there would be even better art. You know, because people think, well, then you wouldn't have any art, and that would be a terrible place to live in. So that kind of, it proves the point that we're holding on to things like art and so forth. Or rather, we're holding on to things like poverty and suffering in order to have art. But in a world where you don't have any poverty, let's say, a lot of people could be artists. A lot of people could just sit around doing what they feel like doing, because you don't have to do something simply for survival. And part of the struggle I know that artists go through, many artists anyways, is wanting to just focus on their art, but have to find a way to market it, have to find a way, because you have to get somebody to give you the money. Why is Billie Eilish speaking at the DNC? Because she doesn't have a choice.
Yeah.
She just reads the script. Otherwise, she doesn't get the platform and the concerts and all that stuff, because someone gave her those contracts. You know, and it's not because she's not talented, but there's a lot of people that are equally talented. Like, there's a lot of artists and musicians that you guys never heard of that, in my opinion, just in terms of looking at things from an objective, you know, kind of analysis perspective, are way better artists than anyone mainstream, and yet you never heard about them because it wasn't marketable. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing or whatever, because it's still in the context of consumerism. But my point is, the way that you get the big platform is by being willing to do what the people who are giving you the money want you to do. So who gives that artist the patronage is the person who wants them to have that platform. And then if you're really good at attracting attention, don't you think other people are going to say, I'd like to be able to use that for my message? Like, wouldn't you love some famous Instagram artist or model or whatever to promote something that you're doing? Of course, you know, because they influence other people. People listen. So Billie Eilish, do you think if she said, no, I'm not going to read that script, I don't like Joe Biden, what do you think would happen?
Too bad.
Okay, no problem. I'll see you at the next concert. No.
Yeah, like you're done. You don't get any more. Like, that's what happened to Kanye. You know, you see it right there. And people will act like, oh, but he's mentally ill. It's like, dude, every artist is. Give me a break. You know, like he's very emotionally persuasive. And he's very willing to just put his emotions out there and be sort of real in a certain sense, right? Which is dangerous if he doesn't have the message that the people who are, you know, wanting to influence reality to stay as it is, if he's going against that, they don't want that, right? Just like you wouldn't want someone coming into your house and telling your children something that would undermine your authority as a parent, would you? And that's how the elite, the 1% of the 1%, perceive everybody else. It's like, you're just it's not even children, really. It's worse than that. It's like they see you as slaves. They don't see you as their children, where it's like they're actually responsible for you. It's more like you're our slaves. You make my life possible, you know? And so you were mentioning earlier, asked at that point about the consumerism. It wasn't always like that. Well, it was at the elite level. If you think about it, it's the elite who have always been wanting more and more and more and more. You see? So you might think, but now everybody has that. Not really, because it's only like 1% of the world that even makes $32,400 a year.
True.
So the life of the average person is still not that great. And there will be all kinds of people who use statistics and stuff to be like, but the average person today lives the life like a king in the 1700s. Like, you can use statistics to misrepresent anything based on your bias. So I'm not trying to use statistics. I'm just using my own self-honesty. So if somebody wants to be self-honest, they can say, wouldn't your life be better if you never had to worry about your survival? Yes or no? Of course. How many times have you wanted to do something, but you couldn't because you had to focus on going to work or doing that next meeting or whatever it was? But then go back even further. How many things are you even doing that you think are fun, but that are in some ways influenced by being in a world where everybody has to make money? You see what I mean? Like, even the options for entertainment are only because someone else is doing it because they have to make money. What were you going to say, Asa?
If you ask any of the three of you, hey, back when you started university, right? Why did you choose your program? The answer is probably not, I really saw that the best way for my life purpose to serve this world is to become a blank or to study blank. And that was just going back to the point that you're saying of, we don't even know the choices that we would make about what we would do with our time, with our life, with our finances, all these things, if we lived in a world that you didn't have to put money as the center point of everything that you do. I was talking to somebody the other day of, they became, they just started school. They want to be an architectural engineer, I believe. And I was like, oh, what made you choose that? She said, I don't know. I like math. I like art. My dad. And it's not a point of judgment. It's like, I hear that all the time. Hey, whoa, that's why I started school. I was like, yeah, I want to take business because I read on a article that I knew that the point of going to university is to get a job. And I read on an article that 70% of business degrees get jobs afterwards. That's why I did it. Because it was just the most likely thing to get me a job, period.
You think about this. I would say most people, I don't know what the percentage would be, but it's probably the vast majority, go to college because they don't know how to do anything.
Yes.
That might seem obvious, like, well, of course, that's why you go to college. Okay. But most people don't come out of college knowing how to do something, unless you get like a software engineering degree or something like that. Right. But think about this. You have all these cases where you have someone like Bill Gates, for example, who left college. Why? Because he knew how to do something. You know, and not that he didn't learn in school. So I'm not saying there aren't things you can learn in school, but that's not why most people go to schools, because they know how to do something and they want to get better at it and they want to create something. Most people go to school because they really have they have no ability to do anything. And they're like, hopefully if I just go here and finish it, I'll be able to survive and survive a little bit beyond just subsistence level. Like I'll have a house, I'll have, vacations or something. Right. And then I think there's many people who just go because they just need to survive. That's like people who go to community college and then they try to, or whatever. Right. And there are jobs you can get, like trade jobs where, you get like a skill and you make pretty decent income considering what most people would make, but I know for myself, I didn't decide to go to college. I just went along with it.
That's a great way of saying it.
I was just going along with what I was being told to do. And there was no self-direction. And I can't blame my parents because they're just doing what they knew to do. They were doing everything they could do with their level of capability in terms of seeing the whole context of everything and what I was able to do and what I could have done. and they were extremely limited by the context of the world we live in. So I can't really blame anybody. It's not even about blaming myself or blaming anyone. It's just realizing, man, my life is so limited even now, just because of the context of what we accept as certain fundamental, like we said, axioms about reality, you know? And I guess we've talked about these before. I don't remember how much we've gone into depth with this in past episodes, but well, you know, we did that episode not too long ago about objections to a world that's best for all, but we haven't really gone into a world where everybody has enough money per se. That was kind of assumed within it, you know? So I think a lot of the objections we handled were more around just the idea that things can't be best or something like that, you know? But when you start kind of digging into why can't everyone just have enough money? Why do we have to, why? There's so many things that you don't get for granted, that you don't get for free. Like oxygen, you know?
You do get for free.
Well, you do and you don't, because you have to breathe it in. Like you have to do something for it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it's there, but you have to do something for it.
Okay.
If you don't breathe, you don't get it. It's not like it's forced on you or something, right? But why is it that money is something that we have to struggle for when it's literally made up? Like, so what I'm saying is even something like oxygen, you have to just breathe it in. That's all you have to do. And it's just right here. But that's something physically real. Money is literally just made up. It's not even a real thing at all. And I know there's the arguments people have about, well, we need to get back to the gold standard and everything should be based on gold. And it's like, but that's still trying to tie it to something limited so that you can give it a value. Why don't you just say that's the value? You know, and how do you know how much gold there is? You're assuming that it's limited. You don't know if somebody's got a whole fucking warehouse full of it that you don't know about, you know? But my point is, with money, we could literally all, if this was a practical point that we got to, hypothetically, right? Or theoretically rather, we could just agree that money has this value and everyone gets enough. And then if there's things that require individual effort beyond what you would expect of others, then that could be the extra parts that you get. But then at the same time, let's say that you're somebody who's more than capable of somebody else for whatever reason, you know, like you're just stronger than somebody else. Okay. If you lived in a world where you don't have to lift a finger barely to have everything you need, then why wouldn't you want to use the extra that you have for whatever reason to try and make the world better for everybody else beyond just what you have at the moment? Why wouldn't you want to? Isn't that what people admire about entrepreneurs and doctors and all these kind of people, is that they're willing to sort of in a way sacrifice, although I'm not suggesting it's about sacrifice. But I'm saying you're here. Okay. So let's say you have some ability beyond what everyone else has, and you don't have to struggle for survival. So you don't have to survive at all. That's all taken care of. We've worked that system out. Now what do you do? You could use your advantage to try and control everybody. Why would you do that?
You probably wouldn't be able to, because you wouldn't really have a point of leverage over them.
You wouldn't, but you could somehow hypothetically use your smarts to trick everybody, or I don't know. But again, the only way you could do that, like you're saying, is to find a way to withhold something they need so you have leverage. So if you couldn't do that, then what would you do? Like, wouldn't you say, man, what can I create? What can I do that would make the world better for me? And you'd be like, well, it's actually more fun if I consider everybody and I'm contributing. You would think about things in a radically different way, you know? And so it's funny because we admire people who are altruistic in this current system, but you can't be altruistic if you don't have money. And I know you find those stories where it's like there's a really poor person and they give up their last dime, and that's so much more important than the rich guy who gives $1 million or whatever. But only from an emotional perspective. And so much of that is just the story itself holds in place some kind of emotional point within yourself of limitation that you don't want to challenge. And so it's like we use those stories to make ourselves feel better about where we're at by comparison, or feeling like there's good in the world or something like that. It also holds in your judgments against people who have money. So you're like putting the person who has very little money but gave that last dime as superior to them, but not realizing that by getting sort of feel good energy out of that, you're actually holding the whole fucking system of poverty in place. Mitch is laughing. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's so embedded in those stories that it's just this fundamental assumption that no one can have enough. You need to give money to others instead of just having one system that just gives the money. So it's not like on me to donate my money or whatever.
What doesn't make sense, like I saw this thing from Warren Buffett where he was saying that they should tax the rich and all this stuff, and he should be taxed at a higher rate. But couldn't he just voluntarily give his money to the government?
Right.
So he says that, but it's like, well, why wouldn't you do it then? Is it because he's thinking, well, we live in a competitive system, and if I did that, I would lose out. I wouldn't be able to compete with the other rich people, so therefore I wouldn't be able to make more money. Is that what he's thinking? Because if that's the case, okay, so if that's the case though, how old is the guy?
He's in his 70s, right? Or
so is he just waiting till the last minute to just get as much money as he can so he has as much money as possible to give away? And like that guy's really smart, right? Like he didn't get that rich by being stupid. We know, like he had a business when he was like 9 years old. He read all the books in the library. He's a genius.
Yeah.
No doubt. So there's no way he can be so actually dumb or naive that he thinks if he just gives all his money to charity, that's actually going to change anything. Don't you think these guys at that level know how things actually work? That's why they're able to make money. And it's the people who don't know how things work is why they can't make money. But of course, the people who know how to make money, because that's their goal, they're going to lie about it. And they're going to present it in the way that everyone else thinks is how it works. You see what I'm saying? They're going to act like charity matters. Yeah. But in reality, like, what do all the rich elite people do when they die, when they give their money to charity? Don't they just actually put it into foundations that it's like, what has Warren Buffett done that has made this world measurably better right now so far?
I don't know at all. But to this point, I was looking up George Soros because I wanted to find out more about him, namely because he's funding one of the politicians here in my local area. And I was like, what does this guy have to do with this politician at all? Like he doesn't even live in this state, you know?
Is it a Republican or a Democrat?
It's a Democrat.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I was looking into him specifically because I wanted to find out about, you know, who is this guy? And as I'm going through, I think like the first paragraph on his Wikipedia, it was so interesting because it says he's given over $32 billion to this Open Society Foundation. I'm like, wow, okay, that's a lot of money. I click on the Open Society Foundation, and what do you know? Who's the founder of it? It's George Soros. It's like he's given away all this money to himself, you know? It's interesting because when you look into all these charities that all these billionaires have given to, it's mostly owned by them. And so they're not really giving away their money. They're putting it in a different format, but then they can just brag about it out in public about how much money they've given to these charitable foundations or whatever.
Let's say you're actually, for lack of a better term, evil. Okay.
Sure.
And when I say evil, I mean, here's what I mean by evil. This is my definition of evil. Okay. You want to continue slavery.
Okay.
That's it.
You want to
continue slavery?
Okay.
Continue slavery. Okay. And when I say slavery, I don't just mean the black people on a plantation. Okay. Obviously that's slavery, but there's a lot more forms of slavery than just that. And the reason I clarify that is because people think slavery ended. They say, no, it didn't end because they have slaves in Libya. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm saying everybody's a slave. Okay. It didn't end. It just expanded. Okay. So if your goal is to continue slavery, meaning continue the point where people do not take full responsibility for their lives, and are slaves to the environment, what's the opposite of slavery?
Freedom.
Okay, is everybody free?
No.
Why? Why not?
Well, people have to go to jobs for 40 years of their life, making, barely making ends meet. They spend most of their day there, most of their week there, most of their year there.
And then they spend the rest of their time dealing with the consequences of that.
Exactly.
I mean, what it's interesting because, like, when I say what is the opposite of slavery, you say freedom, yeah?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So free, being free.
Mhm.
Is food free?
No.
No.
So are you a slave to the economic system in that context?
Yes.
Is a house free? Is property, land free? Is
No.
your clothing free?
Damn.
No.
Is entertainment free? Is art supplies free? I mean, if you wanted to be an artist doing oil paintings, do you know how expensive oil-based paint is? Plus, like,
Very.
all the paint thinners and all the linseed oil and just like all in the brushes, it's insane.
Yeah.
How expensive just to do one painting is. Plus, when you're an artist, you got to make a lot of mistakes. You got to throw away a lot of shit. So that's why you can't. People say, like, I don't need money to be happy and all this stuff. Like, I could just be an artist. I'm like, what are you gonna just draw mud figures with your finger? Like, how are you gonna do that without money?
Yeah.
You're gonna be extremely limited.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because when we talk about slavery versus freedom, but the only other real context that we talk about the word free, and I'm not talking about like mental freedom or something, because that's still within that same context. The only other thing we talk about when something is free is when
Money.
it doesn't cost money.
Yeah.
Why is that called free?
Oh.
You ever thought about that?
Yeah. Because
Why do we say if something doesn't cost money, it's free?
it's available to everyone because
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
There's probably some specific context as to why, and maybe it has to do with something being free from. I have no idea. I don't know what the answer is as to technically, etymologically, why we call it that. But just from a perspective of, in the same sense of, if you look at the word school, right? You have schools of thought. You have a school that you go to school. That's pretty much the same kind of context. And then you have a school of fish.
Yeah.
Like, that's weird, right? In the same sense, why is it that slavery versus freedom, and then you have to pay for something versus it's free? So I think there's a specific reason for that, at least at a subconscious level. None of us are actually free. And that's the whole point. We have to, if you want to do something, if you want to have an impact, you have to raise the money first. So you're not just able to do it. You're not able to just give of yourself freely. If you have something to offer the world, you can't just give it. You have to, because you can't eat. You can't do it if you're hungry. So you have to first feed yourself. That costs money. Now you have to figure out where to get that. And your ability, generally speaking, in the system to get money is based on your education, yeah? And that doesn't equal your schooling, right? It can, if you're in a situation where you can literally, there's a job, and just by you having a degree from this university, they just give you the job. And that happens, and that's happened a lot. I think more and more that's not happening. And more people are competing for jobs that don't actually require a degree, and yet everyone who's applying for it has a degree. So the degree becomes a point of competition, even though it's not required for the job.
Yeah.
But then you also have companies like Google, where they're saying they don't care if you have a degree or not, right? They're just going to give you like a test or some kind of certification. And if you can get that and prove that you can do the skill or whatever, you get the job. It's not about having a degree from whatever school or whatever. But your ability to make money is based on your ability to understand how the system works of doing something and getting money for it, right? So if your only education within that is, I go apply for a job at McDonald's, I pass the interview, I show up, I do the activities, I get the paycheck, I go home. I don't do X, Y, and Z, which would get me fired. If that's your level of education in terms of what you know, and then, but think about a person like that. They know other things too, yeah?
Yeah.
What other things would the person like that know? Where literally their only their education level has brought them to the point where they couldn't get a job better than just McDonald's or something.
They
What else do they
probably-
know?
Yeah.
Probably know about Nike.
Yeah, they know how to consume.
Yeah.
Right. They know about
Video
brands
games.
they like, art, like artists,
They know music,
music, sports.
games.
So they probably, I would assume on average, know a lot about some of those things.
Yeah.
So they're not necessarily stupid, but they just don't understand how the system above the level of their employment works and how to get there and how to speak in a way and interact in a way that allows them to operate at that level. But why don't they have that education? Why isn't everyone equally educated to be able to operate at the highest level in our system? And that doesn't mean everybody has to be a computer engineer, but very quickly we're going to approach a point where you don't need to be a computer engineer to be able to operate at a high level with technology. I mean, I'm not saying there's never a need for computer engineers, because there's always going to be people who develop this like really deep understanding of, let's say, computer engineering, software engineering, and then take things to the next level, right? But how much more would that be freed up if people could just get together and work on a project together because that's what they want to do, and not because they have to worry about where they're going to get the money from?
What's interesting, I think maybe this is just me, but I tend to see, like, when people think of like an alien race, it's like everybody in the race, the entire race, is leaps and bounds more intelligent than our entire race.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, and we tend to think like, I've seen so many stories where it's like the aliens come in and they see that, we haven't figured out how not to fight with each other. And that's how uncivilized or how barbaric or, like we're basically like cavemen to that alien
It's
race.
like we as humanity know that about ourselves.
Exactly. It's like we're telling the story and putting it in the context of, someone else is smarter or whatever.
Like that isn't real. We made that up.
Right.
We know that this is what we're like. Yes.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's interesting because within that point is we know that if someone's not getting the proper food or nutrients or, the right environment, in fact, oh, dude. Okay. So the conversation that I was having yesterday, she brought up a really great point. And she said, she was talking about racism, and she said basically along the lines of, it doesn't really matter so much the color of your skin. What matters more is the culture or your environment that you're brought up in. And she was saying,
pretty obvious, right?
Yeah. And she was saying, like, she is a person of color, but she was lucky because she was brought up in a white environment, right? And the interesting thing about that was, like, I was like, okay, cool, yeah. So that just goes to show you, it's not really about, our color of skin. It's really about, are we providing the environment for everyone? Because what's going on in those impoverished environments. They're not getting the same environment, literally, that, everyone else is getting. And that's what's holding them back. So if we could just change that environment for them, which I know there's a lot to that, but that would really solve a lot of our problems on a major scale rather than focusing on the color of somebody's skin,
See, but part of the problem is just in terms of the dialogue about it, which is why I don't see any value in arguing with anyone about it. I'd rather just look for people who have common sense and are like, okay, I want to be a part of the solution. So I'm more sharing this from the perspective of whoever's hearing this and saying, okay, wow, that allows me to break free from this brainwashing, which is causing me to fight about something that's never going to change anything. If we suggest that, hey, ideally, the best way for a child to be brought up in this world is to have mother and father who are genetically the parents, because here, and we talked about this before, but the major reason for that is because you as a parent you will recognize your patterns in the child.
Yeah.
It's far easier for you to see, like, that's my pattern. Okay, I need to correct this within myself and then support them to correct it. That's not something someone else can really do for the child. It'll always be kind of from an outside sort of a judgment point, right? And of course, the parent has to have these tools, DIP, techno-tutor, and so forth, to be able to have that level of awareness. Most people are not going to have that right away. I understand that. But if we say both parents who are genetically the child's parents, when possible, okay, practically possible, that's the best situation. That is a cultural thing, right? Cultural meaning it's not physically inherent. It's a environmental point that you can change, that you can decide upon and then implement, again, when practically possible. If the father dies and the mother wants to remarry so she can have a husband or whatever the case is, I'm not saying, no, you shouldn't do that. You should resurrect the guy. Like, it doesn't make sense. Practically possible. Okay, but again, going back to the point of how many people are making the decision to not make sure that point is intact because they believe it's irrelevant. So that point can be prevented. Okay, so if it's not possible, I'm not talking about those cases. But saying that, hey, this is what would be best. This is what would be best. That's now being defined as white culture. Right?
Yes.
But to take that further, because you made a really good point, that point that this girl or this woman you were talking about brought up, right? Which is, it's not about your skin color, it's about the culture, right? But the problem is what I see is coming from you could call it left, you could call it progressive, you could call it whatever you want. It's just whoever adopts these points of view, regardless of what you label it.
The anti-racists.
The anti-racists, you see all these things, right? It's this argument that, okay, let's take the position of, okay, first of all, Black children in America. Would you say the majority are in single parent homes?
Yeah.
That's a statistical fact. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now let's without going into the cause of it, I'm just saying that's a statistical fact. It's more so than whites, Asians, etc. Although the numbers are rising also, especially in the whites as well.
Yes.
Is that because of their skin color?
No.
I mean, you could make the argument that it is. You could make the argument that it isn't. Okay, I'm just bringing it up, right? I would argue no, not per se. But the argument that's created is that because of like white supremacy and this systemic racism, let's call it that, it has created a situation specifically on Black people because they're Black, meaning that's the system's starting point is it's doing this to them because they're Black, has created a situation where they're in these single family homes by and large. And therefore, it's put them at a disadvantage. That's one argument, yeah? Okay. But there's the other argument, which is, no, that's their culture. That's the culture that they've adopted. And to say that you should be in a two-parent home, et cetera, that's a different culture. Right? So now you're trying to battle on who's the better culture. But are either of those cultures actually inherent to the person's skin color?
Not at all.
So you can make the argument that the system has imposed that culture on a certain group of people because of their skin color. That is a possibility. But if this is pointed out and it says, okay, let's correct it, and then you say you're imposing another skin color's culture onto this culture, or this skin color, which has a different culture, aren't you then arguing that the culture is tied to their skin color?
Yeah.
So are we able to remove culture from skin color or not? And so the problem that I see is because there's a lot of people who are being very disingenuous in actually wanting to improve society. They're just trying to control, and they're doing it. It's kind of the same thing as the billionaires we talked about. They talk about all the money they gave to charity, which is just their own foundation, so they can continue to control more without having the same regulations around profit and so forth. They can actually use their money they can leverage it more.
Yeah.
So they're not actually being altruistic. See what I'm saying? They're not being genuine about their altruism. It's just to play upon everybody else's emotional weakness around those words, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I can't say that. I mean, I can say it, but I'm saying increasingly more and more people are trying to argue that I shouldn't be able to say that you should have, ideally, both parents in the home, genetic parents for the kids, because that would be a white supremacist like viewpoint. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like, I mean, I'm not just making this up. Like, this is what I'm seeing is being said.
Yeah.
But it's mixing, it's not being logical even within the same logical frame of reference. Because it's basically implying that different races have different cultures. But I thought that was actually racist. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So in other words, is the solution for Black children the same as the solution for white children and Asian children and and Hispanic, whatever race or culture or country or whatever?
Yes.
Isn't the answer that they should have the best possible comprehension and understanding of reality and ability to apply themselves at an equal level to anybody else, so nobody could take advantage of each other, and they could be able to live in this world, contribute and receive and get what they need and have a life of dignity?
100%.
And every child deserves that regardless of their skin color.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then do we need to consider differences in people based on their genetics?
Yes.
Like if I genetically should not eat beef as often as I eat chicken or something like that,
Yeah.
you know, or maybe I shouldn't eat wheat because of my genetics, but somebody else could. Then
Yeah.
I shouldn't be made to eat the exact same thing as them. I should be able to have access to what is best for me as an individual.
Yeah.
Right. But not based on just personal preference only at the expense of anyone else, although being able to consider that when possible as well. That would be the solution for everybody.
Yeah.
So why is it that we have a discussion where it's like the argument being made is that people who are Black or basically non-white, whatever that is, are not being treated equally in this world? But then if we say, well, they should have X, Y, and Z, and that would solve the problem, it's like, no, that's trying to treat them the same as everybody else.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Like there's this double think going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not arguing that everybody should be treated exactly the same, but I am saying that everyone should be treated in a way that allows them the best expression in the form that they're in, regardless of their skin color, race, age, whatever. They should be able to express themselves in the best possible way for themselves as an individual, and considering taking into context what's best for everybody as well. So if a person says, well, my way of expressing myself the best way is to have power and control over others, well, that's not acceptable.
Right.
And it's actually not self-honest. It's not actually best for the individual. Right. So we can take into account individual differences, but then we can have an honest discussion about the differences between races or men and women sexes and things like that. And at the same time, we have to realize we can't make hard and fast lines about everything. Just because your skin color is this color, therefore you get X, Y, and Z. That's not nuanced enough, is it?
No.
Because you could have, you could look white and actually be mostly genetically like Black or from Africa or whatever. You could look mostly Black and still have other genetics and so forth. You could be mixed race. You can't just look at somebody or ask them how they feel and then suddenly know everything that's best for them. You have to be analytical about it. You have to be self-honest. You have to step by step really understand. And I think a lot of that, our science currently is not at the level to make that possible. But that's more to do with the fact that we're kind of behind where we should be at because of
it's
so much.
It would be racist to evaluate those things, basically.
Well, that's part of it. That's part of what's used to shut down.
limitations.
It's used to shut down the discussion. And then obviously
And also
I understand
being based on science being based on financial backing.
that's where I was going with. Yeah. Based on more what corporation has a product that needs to be marketed. And so they need the science to back it up or to develop the product. And so it's not really about what's best for everybody. It's just about consumerism. That's really all that science is about. And most of chemistry and all that kind of research is just based around pharmaceuticals, and most engineering, electronic type research is more based around consumer electronics and so forth. It's not really based on what's actually best to improve this world and so forth, right? Energy research is based around what benefits the energy companies, not so much what's best for everybody. you know.
Climate
But
research.
climate research, yeah. Um,
That's a question. That was a question.
oh, was it a question? Oh yeah, I remember you and I had that back and forth a few months ago, huh?
Did we?
You were asking me the points about climate change and all that stuff.
Oh,
We
yeah.
can talk about that sometime.
Okay.
But but there's so much out there, and the thing is, even if you talk about it, it's just going to get removed.
Yeah.
It's like almost pointless. But I really want to go into that a little bit more about this point of what is really required for everybody, and because what I see it as, it's not about racism, it's about poverty.
Or yeah, what is actually causing the problems?
Like
I
what's
remember
actually going
I was
on
talking
here.
to two friends way back about the whole racism point, and just talking about it historically speaking, like back in the day, and talking a little bit about like what was going on in Africa and why, as a business owner, you would want slaves as a business owner, not as a racist. Why, as a business owner, you would want slaves.
Yeah.
And the conclusion he came to, he's like, wow, even if everybody was white or everybody was black, there'd still be slaves.
Of course.
I'm like, that's a great point. It's really well said.
How do we treat animals versus humans?
Oh, shit. Or
I
vegans.
mean,
How do you treat plants versus humans?
right. You just chew them up and spit them out. But it's
And
like,
spit them out.
you look at like the factory farms and stuff, it's insane what we're doing to animals on a daily basis. But that's a form of racism if you want to really
Even
So-
more fundamentally, like in terms
more
of
fundamentally, yeah.
not just like like choosing a random characteristic and then dividing race based off that random characteristic. It's like actual like species, like, you know, it's more fundamental versus being like, okay, I have straight hair and you have curly hair, therefore we're different races. Like that's how stupid like the skin color
Well,
thing is. I think.
and the thing is, it's really just about our value of life, not looking at the actual value of life and everything as equally important, equally valuable. And that doesn't mean you treat, this the same way you would treat a human being, because they're different forms, they have different needs and so forth, right? And there's a lot of self-honesty required to not go off into la la land vegan activism or whatever the thing
Right.
is.
So Cameron, do you eat meat?
Yeah, you meat. Yeah.
And so how would you? That seems incongruent. How are you going to say that? That all life forms should be treated equally, but then you're going to go and eat it.
But again, I didn't say they should be treated the same.
Oh, got me
Right.
there.
But that being said, let's say I really feel strongly about, like, let's say I'm putting myself in the shoes of a vegan or somebody who's against animal cruelty or something like that. Let's say I feel very strongly about, people shouldn't be eating meat and like killing animals and so forth, right? The idea that you shouldn't eat meat per se is more of a reaction, I think, to how animals are treated. Because you could have an animal that dies naturally. Why shouldn't you be able to eat their meat? You see what I mean? Now, the problem is if you get that taste of the meat and you're like, no, I just want to start slaughtering animals because I got to get that meat. Okay. But why do you assume that animals feel differently than plants? And you could say, well, but I mean, come on, so stupid. Plants don't feel anything. Give me a break. And yet, if you study the destiny of material, you'll get a better expanded perspective of that, right? And what happens is a lot of vegan people get a sense of superiority out of being vegan. I know, because I used to be in that camp. I know what that was like. But that isn't to say there's a lot of people who genuinely want to improve the conditions for animals and everybody, right? But my point is, let's just say you really were upset about the treatment of animals. If you don't eat meat and you go out of your way not to use animal products, is that going to change the system?
Not at all.
And let's say you're not totally lost. Like you're like, well, I don't think we should even eat any animal products whatsoever. Well, let me ask you a question. If based on someone's body, it was okay for their body to consume animals' meat, and you didn't have to harm the animal to get it, what would be the problem? Otherwise, you're just arguing on ideological perspective. So let's just say you're using common sense within it. The way to stop animal cruelty would be to change the money system. Because how much animal cruelty is happening just because a company has found a way to make profit by harvesting animals and basically growing animals, so to speak, and harvesting them and selling them in ever increasing quantities. and they're doing everything they can in terms of cultural propaganda and education to get people wanting that and believing that it's necessary. So as a vegan, you could try and change people's minds about eating meat, but what's going to be your ability to do that? How much influence and impact are you actually going to have doing that? Versus if you just change the nature of the money system so that profit is now irrelevant, how much of that would just fall away?
Good point.
You see what I mean? Like, how many people are going to make a company that's going to go deliberately abuse animals to go and sell a product, and who's going to do the work? There's not going to be any factory workers to do that.
Yeah.
Because they don't need to do it. But then you're going to have to look now honestly at yourself. If you said everybody in the world should stop eating meat right now, how many people would starve because of that?
A lot.
How many people would starve in this world today if everybody stopped consuming animal products? Not just the people in the first world who don't necessarily need to do all this overconsumption. You see what I mean? Like, what about people in other countries, third world countries, that literally, if they don't eat meat, they're going to die because they don't get enough otherwise. You know? So they don't have the luxury of drinking, you know, the $12 juices and stuff, you know, like we just take so many things for granted.
Ah, gotcha.
You know, and our consuming of the organic, vegan, dehydrated, nacho, not real cheese flavored kale chips, which are like $7 for like 2 ounces,
No gluten.
is a product of and holding in place a system that is directly creating poverty in other countries where they're having to consume animals, and their education level would be such that they'll never even be able to consider questioning it. And so it's fun. It's like people can end up doing more harm sitting on a high horse, basically thinking that, you know, everyone should just stop doing something, but they're not necessarily considering the context of what would you actually need to change. Same thing with the racism thing. It's no different. All right. And so, I mean, what is racism?
It's the belief that one race is superior to another race. Maybe it's you think that your race is superior to all other races, or that other races
who
are
actually
inferior.
believes that?
Racist.
Right. But do you know anyone who's actually racist?
Well, that's a interesting question. Because I would say not in the traditional sense that we think of the word of racist.
Okay. Like in what other sense then?
And like, okay, so I know people within my family who believe that, you know, that white people themselves are either evil or that they're inferior in some way, or they believe even of their own people. They'll say, well, you know, it's because they're, you know, black or they're Hispanic or whatever it is, and they'll like put like a blanket statement over an entire,
Like grandma
you know, people.
stereotypes, no doubt. Like,
Yeah.
Them black people, like, or you know, like them white people.
Yeah.
Does she think that her race is superior? I don't think so.
Right. Yeah.
And
That's
when,
it.
Okay.
when black people are calling white people evil, I feel like they think white people are superior almost.
Okay. I want to just put this out there for everybody. We're all fucking evil. And I'm not just saying we as white people. Everybody's fucking evil.
Yeah.
We're accepting a system that is evil.
Yeah.
What other definition? What else can you call somebody who accepts a system that's evil? So there's two ways of looking at it. Why is being evil so bad, first of all? And second of all, why don't we just like change the system?
Okay.
Is it because we don't want to change the system?
Can't
Or is
even
it because
conceive of it?
you can't conceive of it? The problem is everyone's saying it's these people that are bad instead of it's the system.
Right.
So if we continue to find people as evil, then we're going to continue to get evil systems. And what's interesting is okay, let's just look at, for example, the argument that people who are black let's just say non-white, are at a disadvantage in the system, which I would agree. Is the solution to that to tear down the system? How does that benefit those people?
That doesn't benefit anyone.
It doesn't benefit anyone. Now, the problem is on the more, I think in some cases on the more conservative side of politics, so to speak, and I don't think that would apply to someone like Trump or something like that per se, but in more conservative, let's say lower education areas, people would argue that the system is just fine. And all you need to do is just work your way up and do your best and everything. But that's also stupid.
Yeah.
Like the system is fucked. So I don't think racism is a problem, but I don't think the system is okay.
Ah.
Racism is a couple things. Okay, here's the biggest problem with racism. It's used to distract from the actual problem.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's so when people say racism is the biggest problem in this world, I actually agree from that perspective.
Oh, biggest problem.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
You see what I mean? It's being used to distract from what the actual problem is. Because when you have a lot of low educated people on the white and the non-white side, okay, because I know it's like everyone who's racist is just white, but I'm saying, okay, yeah, there are a lot of people who are white who just think the system is just fine. But there's also a lot of people who are not white who think, and white also, who think you should just tear down the system because it's racist.
And
That's
and
not
I
going
was
to
gonna
benefit
say,
anyone.
When you asked who would that benefit, it would benefit people who get off on harming other people, like psychopaths, basically.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I agree with that.
Let me correct that. It wouldn't benefit them. There would be temporary perceived benefit.
But here's the thing. No one's actually tearing down the system.
True.
If you remove local police departments,
Yeah.
that gives the US government the authority to just basically put troops everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. So then it's
That's what will happen, because is George Soros or whoever going to allow their property to be taken from them?
Hell no.
Do you see what I mean? Like the idea that they're just going to have like this communist revolution and everything's going to turn out fine. That's not how it works in reality.
Why do you think he's like siding democratically?
Well, what do you think Democrat means? I like your mustache, by the way.
Thanks.
Immediately ditches.
I associate Democrat with.
Can you twirl it while you talk?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Okay.
I associate it with liberalism. I associate it with.
See, but all of those are just catchphrases.
Yes.
Because even liberalism means freedom, like
yes, exactly.
liberty. It's not. So it's all propaganda.
Mm-hmm. It's like a cool name.
Well, it's literally propaganda. If I call it democratic, that means it's
Marketing.
democracy. Therefore, it's good, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like
It
marketing.
actually just means mob rule.
Oh.
And why would the elite want the mob to rule?
Because they're easy to manipulate.
Yeah, because they're not actually ruling anything. They're not making the rules.
Ooh.
You're just manipulating them, saying these people are racist. Go attack them.
Oh.
Because those people are threatening your control.
Mm.
And this is really when we start talking about Trump and all that stuff. That's what he's threatening.
Okay.
The world is moving towards a point where mega corporations will control everything. And it'll all only ever be about the few corporations left, their profits, and the people who control them.
That's crazy.
And what's funny is the people who are trying to destroy racism and all this stuff are working for those people without realizing it. And because what is the solution being offered by the anti-racists? Huh?
No Democrat? No, I don't know.
No, what's the solution being offered by the anti-racists?
Tear the system down.
All they're saying is demanding justice. We demand justice. What does justice mean?
Fair.
What does it mean? Can you look it up? Maybe Jake can, or somebody can look it up.
Fairness.
It's like when they say we demand justice. What does it mean when they say they demand justice for George Floyd? They just want the cops to go to jail.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, does it stop there though? Is that really what you want? Just the cops to go to jail? That can't be what you
Change
want.
the policing, so they're better trained.
Yeah, better trained.
So justice is the maintenance. Hang on. The maintenance or administration of what is just, especially by the impartial adjustment of conflicting claims or the assignment of merited rewards or punishment. Then there's a second definition, judge. Third definition. It's used as a title for that second definition. Not a
What is just?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna. Having a basis in or conforming to fact or reason. Conforming to a standard of correctness. Proper. Acting or being in conformity with what is morally upright or good. Lawful. Okay.
See, but that doesn't talk about your starting point, does it? Doesn't talk about your principles. Because if the laws are such, then if you're within the laws, then you're okay. Like everything the elite do is within the laws.
It comes from the word law.
Right. So whatever the elite are doing is within the law.
We want laws. That's what everyone's saying.
That's why if you think about it, Warren Buffett's like, look, guys, if you want the rich to pay more taxes, you guys need to pass laws that say we should pay more taxes because we could cover everybody. But how hard do you think he's pushed for that? Like, don't you think he could influence it to make it happen? Couldn't he get together with all the other billionaires that want to do it? Who puts the politicians in? So you were talking about Drake, that why is he funding that guy has funded lots of local politicians. Yeah. He understands that that's where the real laws get made.
Yeah.
It's not just at the federal government. It's really like in all the little tiny municipalities. So if you want to make sure people wear masks, you don't do it at the federal level. You do it at each local county level.
Yeah.
You put people in place that you know ideologically. Because think about it. If you can tie wearing the mask to it represents you're against Trump. And if you anti-mask, you're for Trump, then ideologically, the judge who's the Democrat automatically is going to force people to wear the mask subconsciously. Because it's kind of like get in line with our ideology without realizing that's what they're doing necessarily. I mean, that seems obvious to me. But so when you say we demand justice, that's not a real solution. Yeah. I'm not saying wanting justice is a bad thing, but in itself is not a solution.
Define justice.
Yeah. Like, okay, so how? Like, it's just saying applying the rules in a consistent, rational manner according to what's morally good. Okay, but what does it mean to be morally good? Because you could make the argument that see, here's the problem. I'm not defending the police killing people. But let me ask you guys a question. If somebody broke into your house and the police came and killed them, would you be like, well, I mean, versus if they were like, well, hold on, we don't want to try to kill him. And then he's like, okay, fine. I'm going to beat up your kid. Like, come on, please stop, sir. Just please stop. Fuck you. Like, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. Like, is that what you want in a world where we have crime and we have people who don't have what they need? So therefore they're going to be criminals and they're going to do stuff that's not best. Do you want them to be like, dude, the police are not even going to try to stop me if I hurt people? Is that what you want?
No.
What happens when rapists realize I could just literally start raping people? Would it be possible to abuse that? Would it be possible as a black person to abuse that?
Yeah.
How?
It'd be possible for anybody to abuse that.
What I mean is, if you know that a cop is going to be afraid to confront you because you're black, because they don't want to be the target of racial accusations.
Yeah, of course.
It'd be possible to abuse that.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that it is being abused.
Like, well, actually right now, what is being abused is, that if you go out and you throw a Molotov cocktail through somebody's window, you're going to get arrested, but you also know you're going to get let out the next day. that's being abused because they're showing that these people are going in and out multiple times. And they're also showing some of these people are violent offenders and they're being charged with violent crimes and they're still being let out automatically. Somebody's just like paying their bail just because they know the right phone number to call, you know?
They're being trained to do it too, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
Right.
a fund, isn't it? There's like a fund that goes towards.
Yeah.
But it's like they're training them. Okay, when you get arrested, if you get arrested, here's what you need to say and do. Okay, and then you get out.
Oh yeah, the Sunrise Movement. Did you guys see that?
Oh yeah, that's
Oh, yeah.
Raising the kids to do that.
Right. No, but I'm saying even right now with like stuff going on in Portland and all that, these people are being trained on what to do. Right.
Also interesting, that point that you made about George Soros funding at the local level. He's funding, I think it's the state attorney, right? Like basically the person that makes the rules for
who
what
we're going to
happens.
charge, who we're not going to charge.
Exactly.
And in Wisconsin, they charged that kid, right, who shot those people, right?
Oh yeah.
Even though all the videotape is there and everything, it's pretty obvious what was occurring there.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's not about because I know some people will take that guy and they'll be like, he was so brave in what he did by going there and defending the stuff. It's like you're looking at things in such a limited context. People are very rarely able or willing to look at everything in total context. It's like they either want to be on the left or the right. You know, so either that kid was a hero or he was the devil. And so the person, George Floyd, was either this poor, unfortunate victim or he was this cracked out, you know, loser who was asking for it. It's like, why can't there be, it's all because we live in a world where there has to be police. And unfortunately, that's kind of the side that the more leftist people want to be on. But they want to do it just by ignoring reality right now.
Yeah.
You can't have a world where you have to have money to survive, but then you can't have any police. Because how do you get money to survive?
Work.
It's by having a job or owning property. Because owning property would be like having a business.
Mm-hmm.
Or having real estate that you rent out, for example. And so if you have to work to survive, but then nobody's allowed to own property, who's going to pay you? And so if the money that people who, so let's say, okay, if you have to work to survive, but then everybody should be given enough money to live, but we still have a world where you have to work to survive as a rule, then the only way to get money to the people who are low education is to tax the rich. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where else are you going to get the money from? You see what I mean? Where else do you get it from? You have to tax somebody, and you can't tax the people who have no money. You have to tax people who do have the money. But why do they have money in the first place?
Because they own property, they own businesses.
Right. Because they have the education and the vocabulary of how to be in the system and make money.
Yeah.
And since they're at that advantage, aren't they going to be the ones most likely to figure out how to go write the laws so they don't have to pay tax?
Yeah.
And they're going to have the money to influence the politicians. And so it's the people on the side of not having effectiveness within those things who are demanding that the people who do have it change it. Isn't it more likely that those people are being manipulated by those very same people so that their efforts will never actually change anything? That's what I see is occurring right now. And so the only thing that's occurring is what's actually therefore happening is that the middle class is being destroyed.
So that all that cash and control and power, apparently, like I got some email from my business bank. This is one of my business banks, and they were saying that 70% of, I don't know if this is correct, and I think this is what I read, that 70% of specific part of Canada's GDP is from small business or something like that. And obviously the definition of small business is like, it's not in your head, it's not necessarily a small business. It's like less than 500 employees or something like that. But the point is taking all of that distribution, control, production, customers, money flow, all that stuff, and giving it to big corporations, as you said earlier.
Right.
And so you have really rich people small group, and then a bunch of poor people.
Which is what
rely on the rich people in order to survive.
Which is what 99% of the world already is.
Already that, yeah.
It's just making it 99.9
Right.
is like the 99.
Yeah.
But what do you think is going to happen when it's 99.9?
9.9999.
It's probably just going to keep going. But even if it doesn't, what does it matter? Like, what I'd rather have is a world where it's 100% everybody is equally. It's like we can't force everyone to get to the point of like the 0.1% are now.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I think where we're coming from, us as self-perfected, it's not even a unique viewpoint. It's just unique within the principles that we're standing for. What the elite know is that if you change the environment, you will change the human being. So if I create an environment where, like if I go into the schools and I teach children from a young age that by definition, if you have white skin, you have an inherent bias, and therefore you need to basically kowtow to people who are non-white. Like you need to always give them space, whatever they need to say or do. Like if you're white, you need to step back. What kind of environment are you creating? One of more conflict or less?
More.
So if I create an environment that says if you're a woman, you could do anything. You could be a soldier, you could be a combat veteran, and that's amazing. But if you're a man and you act violent, that is bad. You guys see that's what's happening, right?
Yeah.
Like if a woman was a combat veteran, people are like, what a fucking badass. Yeah.
Yeah. She's such a hero.
But if it's a guy, they'll be like, that guy's toxic.
Yeah.
I don't think it's good if a guy's doing it either. Like it doesn't make sense. But we know men are generally more aggressive. So it's like we can make men feel bad about being aggressive and make women feel bad about being feminine and then swap everything. That's just going to make everyone really confused.
Yeah.
It's not going to create stability. It's trying to be something that you're not. Now, if you're a man and in your physical body, you are more feminine, fine. Go with what practically common sense makes sense for who you are individually. But the problem is you can program someone through words and images and so forth and emotions and feelings to feel wrong in your body. So you shouldn't be going with how you feel. You should be going with a self-honest assessment of what you actually are. Just like with the elephant where they put the thing around his foot when he's a baby elephant, and then when they take it off, he won't go anywhere because he still remembers that chain being there. Just put like a little chain with a stake in the ground and then it can't. Everyone's heard this story, I'm sure, right? But it's like humans are like that too. So the elephant could just rip it out, but he won't. So you see this huge animal that's just like totally tame when it could just like rip everything up. And I think that we've done that to men and women and Black people and white people. Is we're training everyone to be less than what they are so that they won't challenge those who are actually living closer to their potential as human beings, which is the elite. But the problem is if we just demand that they change and they're so bad, what do you think the odds are of them changing?
None.
It's not going to happen. So it's interesting because there's a demand that the people who are perpetuating the problem change. But there's no willingness on the part of the person demanding it to change themselves.
Yeah.
But that requires education. So we have so many people in this world on either side who are complaining about the other side. And it's like, just change yourself, stand up, go to the point of responsibility in the system where you can adjust the environment. Because that environment, so imagine we have a few generations where people grow up in a world where you don't have to compete for survival. In other words, if there's something you want to do and it actually improves the world, or at least improves the people that you're affecting and it doesn't harm anyone, then you have the ability and the right to do it. Because how can you have the right to do something if you have to spend your time trying to survive? Now, could we design a system that could do that? I think so. I think we can be creative as human beings. Like you can look at what we have created so far. And I don't think we're at the limits of our creative ability. I think we need to change our starting point of why we're creating, and that will unleash a lot more creativity.
Yeah, I could see that.
You know, because I can see how I can be quite creative under stress. But if I wasn't feeling stressed, I could be even more creative. And I've seen the difference. You know, and I know people will argue that you need stress to be creative, but that's not true. Right. And if it is true, let's say it is true, then that would be the implication right now, is that the stress of our world, of our civilization, is telling us that we need to level up as humanity. We need to like evolve and go to the point where we're changing our starting point now, like we've been talking about.
When the initial question of what is the source of, you know, the problems and everything that's going on, right? I forget what I said initially. I think I was talking about whatever. But the question that the answer that came to my head is the real problem is the inability to think critically, and the ability to, it's like just more fundamentally people's individual unwillingness to look past a very, very superficial level of seeing things. And we create in the image and likeness of ourselves, and that's why we're like putting all of our attention onto like what's your skin color? Okay, what's your skin color? What's your skin color? And like that's as far as we're going. We're literally like on the outermost part of ourselves, like literally speaking. And that's a manifestation of our individual superficiality.
I just want to add something to that point, which is, I know this is probably going to trigger people, but I'm not too concerned about it.
I'm pretty afraid. Don't do it, please.
The people who are claiming everyone's racist are ashamed of their own skin color.
100%.
You know, and that may be hard for someone to listen to because I'm white. So if I say it, it's like, well, you don't know. Okay. But even that thinking is the evidence that you think white people are actually so superior, they're not ashamed about their skin color. And they never have been judged on the basis of their skin color. So we're going to start judging white people on the basis of their skin color.
Show them what it's like.
Because it's wrong to judge people on the basis of your skin color. And it's like, what? It's like, I see all these people who could potentially become Hitler. So I'm going to round them up and put them in concentration camps. It's like, why don't you like Hitler? Because he's rounding people up and put them in concentration camps. You never do that. So evil. So I'm going to do that because these people are evil and they like that guy. And it's like, but you're doing the thing that you're saying is bad. And that's the basis of why you think this other person is bad and why they should stop. And so but you're adopting the thing that you're saying they're doing. It makes zero sense. But again, I don't think, what I'm trying to say is I'm not pretending to believe that the people arguing this are actually comprehending what they're saying.
Yeah. That
they're just repeating what they've been told to memorize, and they've been given permission to do it, and they've been given power if they do it. Like if you do this, you now have a position of authority in this world, and you are allowed to just do whatever the fuck you want now.
Wow, the education.
Why? Because all it does is destroy everything at the middle level. I mean, imagine if you were at the very top and you wanted to divide society against itself to eliminate any competition anywhere close. The problem is if you have middle class and you can have your own business and you can actually, if you apply sound business principles and effective education and so forth, you can become you can go up here. Do you see how that presents competition? But if that's not even a possibility, then can the bottom part ever get to the top?
Never.
That's why in these countries like South Africa or all these other countries, these people usually come to other countries to do it. It's like, unless they know somebody, you know what I mean? But if you're just somebody who doesn't know somebody, you can't do it there.
Hey, you know, like in manipulative, abusive male-female relationship, like the story of like how the man will like break that girl's confidence. I would see this happen in high school. They'll break the girl's confidence. She could be super beautiful, but he'll tell her that she's like super ugly, like nobody likes her and all this stuff. And then she ends up with that guy forever. Because she becomes dependent on him for the superiority. It's like, that's the fun. You guys don't, do you guys have any?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah, but it's like he's like the only guy who loves her or something. So she's like, well,
you know, it's
like
funny.
creating so much chaos in society that we're just going to be like, can somebody take care of us, please?
Right.
Stop madness. Like, it's okay. We got you.
So it
like,
almost seems like that's what we're arguing for, because we're saying an equal money system, everyone has what they need. But what we're saying is we need to raise the education level of everybody so they can function in a world where they don't feel like they need somebody else. So we're all accepting and giving our consent to the system so that it can be created to provide for us. So it's not a person providing for us. It's a system that we all created.
Mm-hmm.
That's a different thing. Versus if you just promise that you'll take care of me, I'll vote for you and give you political power to do whatever you want. And I hope you'll take care of me. Like you said, that's what's occurring right now. That's not what I'm suggesting.
Yeah.
What do you think, Mitch? You've been awfully quiet.
I mean, I see it. It took me a while to get it to where it really does come back to money. And as someone who just, in the past 2 years really figured out how to make money and keep it and grow it, I just saw how much it took for me to do that. I mean, it's a monumental task for us to take on, but that's why we're doing this. I find it interesting that I'll talk to some people and they're like very democratic, liberal, progressive. But then I bring up something like equal money, where let's get everyone at least enough so that they're set. They don't have to stress about going to work or things like that to put food on the table. And they get hung up on, no, I firmly believe like people need like some sort of work to do to like, for whatever reason, it's like they'll get some sense of self-worth out of it or something. But these people have not listened to the Self-Affected podcast yet.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting thing where it's like the limits of our imagination, because we're so limited in our ability to think of what a fulfilling life looks like. But it's, well, you have to have work. Otherwise, if you had enough money, you'll just go spend it on drugs or something. So there's a lot of nuance to that.
Like if you had slaves and then they started to stand up and be like, hey, what the hell? Why are we slaves? Wouldn't it make sense for you to convince them like there's no purpose in your life if you're not working? So they'll be like, oh, fuck. Well, okay. Well, can you at least pay us? Sure. Okay. Yeah, I'll pay you. Where do they get the money from to pay the slaves?
You just make it.
You just make it out of thin air.
That's so funny.
And isn't that how it works? If anyone doesn't know that, I mean, you can just study what the Federal Reserve is. It's like literally make money out of thin air.
I was gonna mention that. That's so crazy. Because you're talking about how the point of consumerism was developing, how's all the pricing going up, developing, and something to do with money. Were you talking about the formulation of the Federal Reserve? I think you mentioned
1920s, yeah. It was like the Federal Reserve Act, which gave the power to print money to the Federal Reserve and all that.
How did that?
From what I heard,
this is that part where I go, well, you got to check out this book over here, like I always do. But no, there is a really cool book called
The Creature of Jekyll Island, right?
Yeah, and I just
Something
don't
like
know
that.
where it is on my bookshelf. But
It's so funny
So
when
I
he
can't
turns
grab
around
it.
and starts looking, and then he was.
But anyways, it's back there somewhere.
Here it
But
is.
yeah, it's by E.G. Edward Griffin, I think. But they go into all of that.
What's
But,
it
I mean,
called? What's it called?
The Creature from Jekyll Island.
The Creature from Jekyll Island.
Yeah.
It's a really cool book. So, but they go into all those points.
So an interesting point that you're making here, and I hear this a lot, but maybe it needs some clarification about the destruction of the middle class, right? Who is the middle class? I think that needs to be clarified so that, someone listening, like, is someone with a job, are they in the middle class? or is it someone who owns a business? Is it, because what I see really plainly going on right now is anyone with a small business, that small business is being destroyed in the moment. Right.
Yeah.
And those who have like a job, for the most part, if you've got a good paying job, well, some people they're out, some people maybe they're working remotely, some people are getting paid regardless of what they do or don't do right now.
It's like the slaves are okay, but the people who are trying to start their own plantation, take them out.
Okay. Instead of getting into the semantics of what defines the middle class and all that, because I'm not so much interested in the middle class, because I think there are many people who would argue we need to maintain society and there should be a middle class, and it's the way you go from here to there and so forth. But we know that's not what happens. So I'm not arguing you need to maintain the class system in society. But what I'm saying is think of it more like the structures that the middle class could take advantage of. Okay? The structures they could take advantage of. They could start their own business. Okay? That's what's being destroyed.
Okay.
I'm not saying the middle class is being destroyed.
Yeah.
Even though that will be a consequence of it. It's the structures of, I could have my own business. I could basically, I don't have to be a slave to just going to college, getting a job for a major corporation. I could start my own business. I could do all kinds, like my son could create an electronics company where he creates his own circuit boards and solders all the parts together, and then eventually has a warehouse that does that with robotics that creates everything, and then he sells these little circuit boards. And I'm just giving an example. That's something like Steve Jobs literally did, right?
Yeah.
If that falls, like, everybody's done.
The doors are all closed.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Aged up.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is the corporations there'll be so much gap between here to there will just be no pathway anymore. So as that's maintained, we can bring everybody up. For example, everybody could start a business in education, their own business. But if there's literal laws that say, well, anybody you interact with, if you don't have a license and you don't have so many employees and you don't pay for all the healthcare and XYZ, then you can't do it. And there's all these regulations that make it impossible. Well, then it's just not possible.
Yeah.
Like I just sent this article to Drake. I think I posted it on one of our groups, but they were talking about in Massachusetts, they are looking at regulating these homeschooling micro school pods.
Yeah.
And they're saying if you have more than, was it 5 or 10?
5.
More than 5?
Yeah.
Or it's like if you have a group of 5 or whatever it was, like you can operate without a license only if it's less than 5, or there was something specific there.
Less than 5 and you're not getting paid.
But you are not allowed to charge for it. There can't be any exchange of payment within it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Which is ridiculous.
So anybody who was like, well, I'm going to start a homeschooling pod and have 5 of my neighbors and I'll be the tutor and I'll teach all them. Nope.
Government's like, can't do it full time, bitch.
Can't do it. So what? Only a school can do it? But the school has to go to all these regulations and everything.
Damn.
And this got passed in Massachusetts?
I don't know if it got passed.
Okay.
Did you read that part, Drake? I don't know.
No.
I think it's just proposed legislation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Damn.
Who's proposing that?
Yeah, who's cooking that up? Yeah.
But they're also, that's the same state that wants to mandate the COVID vaccine if you go back to school. Isn't that like saying basically everyone has to get the vaccine?
Yeah, those two things in tandem. Yeah.
You see how it fits together, right?
But when
who does that benefit?
When you look at it you look at those individually, if you don't have that ability to link them, you'll just be like, there's no agenda. You're just you're a conspiracy theorist. That's what you are.
Yeah, it's easy to call someone a conspiracy theorist when you're low information processing ability, because you literally can't see a fucking pattern. You have no inductive reasoning ability. And it's not that inductive reasoning is always, implies there's a connection. It's just You have to be able to see a pattern and then test the hypothesis, right? But you have to be able to see patterns. I mean, mathematics is literally defined in some senses as the science of detecting and analyzing patterns. Most people cannot think mathematically. They can't. Right? But that's low education. So if you kind of go back to kind of where we started with the point about money, through changing the nature of the money system, we can then influence education. Because right now, what allows you to get the best education in terms of the context of the system?
Money.
Money. It shouldn't be that way. Now, we have to work within the system. Obviously, with TechnoTutor, it's a business. We can't just say, well, it's free for everybody. That's not how reality works, right? But the whole starting point of it is to take enough people into the 0.1% that then we can change the laws around money and education and so forth so that everyone can have access to it. But if you think about it, if Bill Gates wanted to put a PC on everybody's desk, should he have done it the charitable route? Wouldn't have happened. You see what I mean?
It had to
he
be
went
a
the business route and it worked, right? The problem is his starting point is not to make the world best for everybody, right? It's not. There's enough points where you can see he's a really smart guy, and yet he's deliberately misrepresenting certain things that you're like, the guy is not trying to do what's best. He's done some things that ultimately will allow us to do more, like the fact that we have these computers and so forth, right? So it's not about judging anybody. Everybody's fucking evil. Why not just accept that? See, and if you realize everybody's evil, then you can't anymore blame white people are just racist. And think about this. If you said black people by and large have low self-esteem, would that be a racist thing to say according to the system?
Yeah, of course.
Right. But if you said white people on average feel superior to other races, would that be racist?
Oh.
According to the system, no.
According to the average person's logic about it, I would think they would say no too. But in the part of the problem is you have enough white people agreeing with that retarded logic that it's enough people agree with it that it becomes fact.
Yeah.
But the point is that that's saying that. Okay, wait. Anyways, first I wanted to go back to that last point. What did you say right before that?
Asking me?
Yeah, Cameron. Right
remember.
before that last question.
Check the tapes. Let me get our producer.
Jamie.
He's talking about the licenses, the homeschooling.
No, like immediately before the last question.
I have no idea.
Shucks, buddy. Oh God, buddy.
Is this something you wanted to
That's
add
racist.
Yeah. Before the.
Did you know what you wanted to add?
Well, I that's supposed to trigger it.
Oh, okay. Well, that's too bad. That's gone now, buddy. You're gonna have to listen back and save it for the next podcast.
You'll be in the chat room, which is non-existent. But the point was, why are we focusing on money? Is because we know that's the driving force behind every decision that everyone makes, even though you may feel like it doesn't. It still has influenced where you're at to that point. What were you going to say?
Clarify what you mean by evil.
Oh, okay.
Right? Because people just associate evil with a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you say, accept that you're evil, what do you mean by that? That I kill and murder? I would kill and murder? Like, what?
Well, this might sound facetious, although I'm not being facetious, but what is the word backwards?
Live.
Right. So it's the opposite of living. It's just being a program. That's evil. That's being a slave, literally. Being a slave means you're a program and you can't go outside of your program no matter what, even if it's not best for you. So, I mean, how else can you define it? See, when you take the emotional charge out of it, you take the morality out of it. Why is somebody who looks at porn any worse than somebody who rapes? Now you can say because they're not acting on it.
Yeah.
Right. But what you don't realize is the girl or the woman in the video isn't there because she wants to be there. She's there because of a money system and education and so forth. She doesn't have a choice any more than the person working at McDonald's has a choice. She's there because it's the culmination of the circumstances of her life, and you're getting off on that. How is that different than raping somebody?
Yeah, the starting point is the same.
Right? And I know because when I was a kid, I was exposed to porn very early on, and it was a very difficult point for me to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the most pernicious points of abuse in our world, because it degrades males' ability to really be creative and self-disciplined in this world and to have effective relationships. And so, yes, a lot of women don't want to be with men because all the men see them as sex objects. And there's no actual intimacy there. The men have been abused by pornography. You know, and when I was, 10, 11 years old, something like that, I had access to the internet. And nobody was even aware at the time that that would be a problem, I think.
Yeah, so true.
You know, but now you can't say that that's the case. Like if you're a parent and you're just letting your kid go online and not directing or having any conversations or supporting them or anything. And even beyond that, because, the parents are like, okay, well, I understand there's going to be some bad things on the internet. I'm not talking about that kind of conversation. I'm talking about from the time they're an infant, talking to them about abusing their body with the pursuit of energy. That kind of conversation, which most people can't have because their processing ability is so low. They're not even questioning it within themselves. Right? Abusing your child with chocolates and candy and shit. The parent will give the child candy if they just shut up. What's the difference between candy and looking at porn? You're training the same circuits. You're training the child to abuse their environment for an energetic charge. Right? And that's kind of like some high vocabulary stuff, but not really. It's just you have to really be honest with yourself. And it's the same thing that's being done in this world, that we as human beings are allowing our environment and our reality to be destroyed bit by bit so that we can extract literally something that's made up out of it. Like we're destroying the physical environment to get money, which we've made up. Does that make sense? Like if you go over there and you destroy that, I'll give you 2 units. 2 units of what? Magical mind units. And I'm going to write them on the board here. See, look, you got 2 of them. I'm like, I do? Yeah. They make you feel good. Okay. But if you take those little units over there, then you can survive for another day. But what you had to do to get it was something that you wouldn't have rather do. Wouldn't it be better just for us to figure out once and for all, this generation, figure out how to create a system that takes care of everybody's needs? And that doesn't mean there won't be no effort involved. But what if it's a minimal amount of effort? We putting kids in school from the time they're 5 years old till the time they're 18, and they come out of it with no skills whatsoever. What if instead of that, from the time they were
4 more years of school?
What if instead from the time they were 12 or 13 to 17, they went into a group environment with other kids where they learned about a whole lot of really cool stuff and played games together and developed group dynamics and all kinds of stuff around that. And then also did labor to produce the stuff that we all need as a society.
As in co-op becomes like not a co-op between a slave and a business. Like it becomes us cooperating with each other. Like in school.
It's like a rite of passage as a human being. When you go 13, you go to the cool place where you're around a bunch of other children all the time. You don't have to be with your parents anymore. And you get to like learn about being in a group and doing cool projects and making shit. And you're thinking, oh, you're just having them slave labor in a field? No, I'm thinking there's probably going to be robots doing that. You're probably learning about how to fucking maintain robots and build new ones and shit. Or they could be going into a pathway that interests them to develop some skills. But as it's like we have interns, but don't the interns actually do a lot of work? So it's kind of like that. But instead of it being for a corporation, it's like in a way, it's like a thing that benefits society. So what I'm saying is you have this youthful energy and you could be applying that for a short period of time. Then you could give back to the society and you could give to yourself in the future because the next generation is going to do that. And I know people will say, oh, that sounds like child abuse or something like that. No, it's not. we're already enslaving children from the time they're little infants to the TV and to the iPads and to candy. And then when they're 5 years old, enslaving them in the school system where they just have to sit all fucking day and do shit they don't want to do. Do you know what I mean? So it's like we could be a little bit creative with it. Right? But my point is, it doesn't mean there won't be any effort. And you could still learn the value of work. You could still learn the value of working together and things like that and producing something. So it's not like we have to throw all common sense out the window, right? But we could create a system if we're creative and we work together where, now part of that is the biggest hurdle, I think, to all of this is the 99% resistance to the idea that we could have a world that's best.
So what do you think is causing that resistance? What's
Their
under that?
vocabulary.
Yeah, ignorance, not even knowing that there's solutions like this out there.
It's their processing ability and then also their vocabulary itself.
Any individual point we talk about, people, a reaction will always be, oh, so you're saying we just shouldn't have blank. If we say like, okay, drinking alcohol isn't the best. Okay, so you're just saying we should ban alcohol. Oh, you're just saying that we should ban pornography. It's like, no, that will never work. It'll never work.
No.
Using laws to force it's the exact same thing that happens when a parent tries to force a child to do something. There's going to come a time when that child is like, oh, I don't have to do what you're saying. And I can get away with not doing it. In other words,
Here's how you ban alcohol. Ready? You create a world where parents don't have to go to work. And they don't or people don't have to go to work and they don't feel any need to like escape from their reality.
and then
because
people who are like, but they learn drinking when they're in high school. Yeah, it's just
I had to force myself to stop drinking initially, and I didn't want to. But then as I actually started taking more responsibility in my life, I didn't want to drink anymore.
Yeah.
So it became you would have to force me to do it. And it's not because I'm a teetotaler, like, it's like, I don't want to be intoxicated. If something comes up, I want to be able to respond to it. I want to be here. If you call me or someone needs me or my kid needs me or whatever's going on, I need to be able to respond. And when I drink alcohol, I'm not here. Same thing with smoking pot. I used to like that euphoria and all the feelings and stuff I would get from it and all that stuff.
We learn it really young, right? And that's when it's like
it's the pursuit of happiness.
Our parents do it. Yes, exactly.
But the pursuit of happiness is a cover-up of the acceptance of this evil. You see what I mean? It's the acceptance of it's the acceptance of being here and not being allowed to live. So you're pursuing happiness, which is a mental mind game to try to tell yourself a fantasy story about why your life is so great and how it's going to get good and all this stuff while you're literally just a slave. You're pretending. Bill Gates doesn't pursue happiness. He just fucking creates shit, whether it's best or not. But the only reason he's allowed to get away with shit that isn't best is because everyone else is so fucking stupid. Now, the problem is you can't just tell people to get smart. It's not going to work. You have to be smart to get smart because you have to have smart parents to get smart. You have to have parents who are smart enough to give you what you need when you're a child. That's why we have TechnoTutor. Because you as a parent are not going to be able to give your child the vocabulary beyond what you have. You can't. If you don't already have it by the time they're born, they ain't going to get it. Unless you just take your child and give him to Bill Gates. But you know what? If he's not, if it's not his kid, guess what he's going to do with him?
Put him to work.
Yeah, put him in a public school. Common Core, all this other shit. That's not what he did with his kids. You see what I mean? So he's not going to treat your kid like his kids. So you have to take that back for yourself. That's why my kids are so smart. That's why they have such high vocabulary, such high ability at such a young age. Because we're taking that responsibility. It's not because I'm super smart. Because I'm not as smart today as I could be. Because I still have things I can learn. But my kids are way ahead of where I was at. But that's the power of technology. And that's why I'm saying anything that we're thinking is not possible, if we shift our starting point, a lot more is possible than we realize. It's just having the starting point. It's being willing to forgive yourself and let go of what you think has to be, which if you're honest with yourself is just limiting you. And so what's happening right now is instead of doing that, people are wanting to deny reality. and think that everything will just magically work out, because we've all been taught these fantasies about heaven and all this kind of shit. Drake, if you need to, you could just go real quick.
I did.
Oh, you already did? Oh,
I did.
I didn't have to say anything. I didn't even notice you were gone.
It's great.
I was gonna tell you this real quick. Like last night, I was playing with Max downstairs, and Katie was there too. Seneca was already in bed. It was pretty late, and Katie mentioned this point about heaven, and I don't remember what the exact context was. I think it was because I had posted that video about talking with Max about what happens when you die, and then
Or like his fear point of death, like that one.
yeah, and somebody had posted something about heaven, and it had to do with that conversation. That's how I remembered how to get there. But anyways, Katie had brought up the word heaven, and Max was like, why are you guys talking about heaven? And we were explaining the context of why we were talking about it. And Katie had brought up the point, people believe that in heaven and so forth. And he was like, why do people believe in that? And he was asking us more questions, even though we've already talked about this before. He wanted to know more about it. And I was like, I said, people want to believe that when you die, you go somewhere better than what's here. And he was like, he started laughing. He's like, what do they think it's like? And I said, okay, they basically believe you don't have any pain. You're feeling great all the time. You have everything you need. You have plenty of food or whatever it is. You don't have to worry about anything. And he goes, oh, okay. So, I mean, that's like our house. And I was like, Katie and I kind of looked at each other like, what do you mean by that? And he was like, well, I mean, like our house is heaven.
That's awesome.
And I was like, what do you mean, Max? And he goes, well, we're in heaven right now. And I was like, wow. Katie looked at it, I was like, holy shit. I was like, wow. And
that's so cool.
And I was like, that's really cool, Max. I was like, you have to understand though, a lot of people don't have a house. Like they don't have a house like us, and they don't have a big backyard and a pool, and they don't necessarily have enough food. They don't have enough money and so forth. Right. And he was like, well, he always makes up an age now. He's going to do something at a certain age. And he goes, well, when I'm 68, I'm going to make sure everyone has enough money. And I was like, okay, well, how are you going to do that? And he was like, well, I'm going to have a business, and I'm going to get $100. No, I'm going to get $200. And I'm going to give $100. No, wait, no. Yeah, I'm going to give everyone, no, I have to give them $100, and then I'll still have $100. And he was like trying to explain it. And I said, well, you have to understand, Max, the major problem is people don't have money every month. So even if you give them money one time, they still need money the next month. Every time we go and buy groceries, we have to pay money for it. And he goes, oh, okay, well, I think I'll need $4 billion. Okay, so if I had $4 billion, and he starts explaining how he's going to try to like give everybody money, right? It's just really interesting because that's just kind of, to him, it just makes sense. We're not teaching him, well, if you don't have money, you're, fuck you. Or like, you just have to get a good education. Because like people say that, but don't you have to have money to get a good education? Well, I know somebody who worked at McDonald's and put themselves through college and so forth. And I'm like, yeah. And are they a billionaire? Do you know what I mean? Like, are they? Or are they just getting a good job?
Right.
Where they're still struggling and so forth. It requires money. And the only solution that I see is, why shouldn't everyone just have money? Now, what would somebody argue against that for? What are they going to say?
Because if everybody money, then nobody's going to want to do anything, which I think you.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I would still do things.
Right.
Like, wouldn't you be really bored?
Yeah.
Because think about it. Does Bill Gates do it just for the money?
No.
I mean, when you have $50 billion, what's 51 billion?
Yeah. Right.
But he does probably more than anybody we know. I'm not saying we should do it for the same starting point, but I think he just wants to affect reality. And if you have him versus a bunch of people who are not at his level, what choice does he have but just do things within the limited context that he has? So the solution isn't for Bill Gates to change. It's for everybody else to change. Because when everybody else changes, what choice will he have?
He has to change.
But and if you think about it, I'm assuming if I was in his shoes, I'd be like, oh, fucking awesome. Everybody's smart like me now.
Yeah.
This is great. Now we can do it a lot more. My life can be way better. Don't you think he would at that point be able to say, maybe instead of trying to control everybody, if I just work with all these really smart people, we can make my life and everybody's like way better. Like way better than what I was able to do with Microsoft and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
But is that even a possibility for him to think that?
No.
He can't, because from his perspective, I'm sure it's not even possible. It's like a pipe dream.
He probably gets so many hate letters that he's like just afraid of like dying. Like eventually people are going to be like, fuck you, Bill, and then like rush his house or something.
But that's what we're seeing right now being projected on to the white middle class.
Mm.
They're the evil of society, and they've been oppressing everybody this whole time and so forth, when most of them are just living hand to mouth this whole time too.
Yeah, they're just trying to survive. They're like, fuck. Now
And yet there are the ones who have businesses and are benefiting from the system, and aren't caring if it changes or not. So I'm not defending anybody. The system needs to change. It's just no one's offering a real solution other than us. And there's some things that we're going to have to figure out together.
Yeah.
Like, okay, what are the actual laws that should be written so that things can start being adjusted? Well, we'll figure that out when we get there. The first focus should be on, let's get enough people where we can now have a new 0.1%. That takes money, and it takes ability. It takes effective vocabulary, intelligence. But more than that, it takes you proving to yourself that you'll never give up. Because regardless of what side you're on, think about the shit you have to take when you're in those positions. And what do those people do is they're just like, keep going. And some aren't able to handle it, but most of them are. That's why they're there. Problem is, a lot of those people, they're at such an extreme level of talent that because it happened not in a directed way, it happened in sort of like a pre-programmed way, they also get a lot of the extreme levels of other things too. You see what I mean? Like extreme perversion, extreme abusive personalities, extreme all kinds of other stuff. So you're going to have to process all those elements of your personality too, so that when you're in a position of extreme pressure and extreme responsibility, you'll be able to do what's best and not just go back to your programming. You know? It's like if you're Billie Eilish, do you stand up on that stage and be like, you know what? Fuck this system of accepting that everybody should have to work to survive and blah, 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 blah. We should have a better system.
No,
or do you go, I'm making a lot of money. I got this big house. It's all leveraged. I got to do this. And I don't know what the thought process was. She might actually believe what she's saying. They might have just found somebody who believes it. I don't know.
But isn't it?
But also that's a productive environment.
Isn't it interesting that everyone within that environment, all the entertainers, all have the same kind of political views, right?
True.
Like, wait a minute. I remember seeing this tweet that was like, it was all the like famous comedians, all the talk show host comedians, all those guys, right? And like the quote under it was something along the lines of like, you know, all these different networks could come together and, you know, all have a drink together or, you know, have a laugh together, whatever, right? But then someone pointed out, like, isn't it interesting that all these different networks all have the same political views? They make, you know, about the same money, you know, and they're all virtually the same person. You can swap them out. They're all virtually the same.
That's a really good point.
Right?
Yeah.
There's like this idea of like trying to make it seem as if there's some diversity, you know, but it's a false choice. And highly recommend watching, you know, Century of the Self, because they go into like all these choices that we think we have are really just false choices. And you think you're
It's
making
the illusion of choice.
Exactly. You think you're making your own decisions when the reality is that's what you were, those are the only opportunities you were given. You didn't have a choice in the first place.
So what do you guys think? Have we addressed the point? I mean, there's so many different dimensions that we can go into. And anything that we talk about, people are going to have an objection, which is okay. Like that just means you need to be explained more clarification and so forth, right? But I think for just a moment, I want to give a point, and I would like to get y'all's perspective as well on it, so people can hear from different points. But there's nothing that I'm going to say or any of you guys are going to say in itself on a podcast episode that's going to totally change a person's starting point. It might shift you like initially, but then it takes work and effort and discipline and time to walk through all the things that are going to come up in your life that would prevent you from becoming honest with yourself completely, to let go of your limitations and change them. And what's interesting too is there's probably within you as an individual a weakness that could actually be your strength. I'll give you, for me, for example, I would say one of those would be like my intelligence. It was always directed in a way within my life, generally up until, not too long ago, to become a point of superiority over other people, which was feeling like an emotional lack that I had because of points of just abuse and self-abuse and so forth. But then what happens is most people take that and then they use it as a way of judging themselves, instead of figuring out how can you take that and actually make it your strength, right? So now what I realize is I have a responsibility now and an actual ability to then explain things that makes obvious sense to me that is not obvious to other people. And I mean, and it's not about superiority. Like Bill Gates can be super fucking smart, but he doesn't understand this point. And so it's my responsibility, and that's not singularly my responsibility, but I'm taking it on as a responsibility within myself to help the world and other people understand that we could have a world that's best for all, but it's going to require certain things to happen. Perhaps what most people think is either the only way to have a world that's best for all is that it magically happens, or it's got to be some violent revolution. So there's no in between.
Or you die.
See what I mean? Yeah, or you die. But again, that's magical, right? So, but the reason I'm sharing that story is because it's taken me a long time, and I'm not saying I'm completely there yet, because it's still a process. But to remove those parts of my personality and my character that would prevent me from being able to like be of actual support in this world to everyone else and myself. It's not just about self-sacrifice. Like I want the world to improve. I want the world to be best. But removing the elements where you want to just control everybody, and becoming a parent is a big part of that process for me, of like realizing there's another human being and I don't want to control them. I want to support them and influence them and impulse them with what's best, but not from a force point. I want them to choose it because they see it's best, which means my focal point is to help them have the understanding of it. You see what I mean? And then have my example. Because if I had the ability to understand and I saw examples of it, I would want to do it. And I know, because that's like when I met Bernard Pullman, I was like, holy shit, somebody can actually be like that, like not be self-sacrificial, but actually be effective and considering what's best and never having any points where it's just their ego talking. Like, that's pretty cool. And stand up for what's best in this world. Like, but I had to have the understanding of it. So a lot of things made a lot of sense to me early on that I think even people who started this process still don't even necessarily understand. And it's not because they're bad people or anything. It's just they maybe didn't come into it with the same level of vocabulary, but then also I've been using TechnoTutor for a long time. So it supported me with that. And that's why within everything we talk about, every episode, we're always coming back to these points, because we're not just promoting it because we want to promote it. We're promoting it because it is the solution. And because without these things, TechnoTutor, DIP, you as an individual don't have the tools to be able to remove those elements that are going to hold you back and then put in the ones that you need. It's like if I just told you open up this computer and change the programming, unless you know specifically how to do that and you have the right tools, you're not going to be able to do it. You're just going to be like, that's not possible. Maybe somebody else can do it. But the point is everybody has to be able to do it. So right now we're just looking to reach those people who want to be like that first wave, because the first wave will start creating the changes in the conditions of the system that will create the environment so that larger waves of generations of people can then develop the self-awareness, the self-responsibility, and so forth. Does that make sense? Maybe you guys can give me feedback on that or add to it where you see I might be lacking in what I'm explaining. Meaning, I want to handle the objection of, well, how the fuck is everybody, all 7 billion people in this world, going to just totally change their education? That's probably not going to happen in my lifetime. But my children are way more advanced. If I imagine where they're going to be at when I started this point, like, and then where their children are going to be at. But that doesn't happen just randomly. So it's like the first wave is to get into the positions to start changing things so that, for example, there still is the possibility where you can create your own business or something like that. Like if those things fall, I mean, there's no more possibility. You see what I mean? And then that's the consequence. That's real consequence, right? The last time society collapsed, it took 2,000 years to get back to this point, right? What do you think?
I mean, there's so much in there, but I'm really glad that you brought up the idea of the waves, because that helps me to understand what this actually looks like. Where it is, this first wave is the people who get it, that we need to change the money system, we need to change the education system, and you do that through getting to different positions of power within the world system, so we can actually change the laws. So that makes very clear sense to me, and I see that that's the first main benchmark to hit. And then I also see the rate at which the whole system is collapsing in on itself. And then, where it's actually realistic, where maybe the middle class won't even be a thing, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 years down the road. So we need to act now. We don't have all the time in the world. But now also, here's another really cool point, is that education and being deeply involved in the education industry that's a future-proof skill. There's going to be a ton of re-education that's needed on so many levels. Think about every truck driver, every Uber driver, every factory worker. Those are all people that will be replaced. It's just a matter of time. So when you can join TechnoTutor, you're not only learning how to sell, how to talk to people, how to build your own vocabulary, but then also you're becoming part of an industry. Maybe you want to be a tutor and tutor the local kids, or you want to learn about what microschooling can really be. Like education, we talk about being a $1.2 trillion industry in the US alone. That's massive. And so for those who want to become part of that new 0.1%, 0.01%, education is right there. And so that's going to be, that's the main focus I see. And so that helps me put it into context when we look at something as bold as changing the whole economic system. That's how I can see it and make sense of it. And I know every day we're working on it.
It's a really important point too, because it's the way that you work within the system to get to the point to change the system.
Exactly.
Because without that understanding, it's like you have the most disenfranchised people who are there because they're not effective in the system. What choice do they have but to try and tear it down? They don't know how to build a system. If they knew how to build systems, they would be building businesses.
Right.
So the people who know how to build systems are like, fuck everybody else. So that's what we're representing with TechnoTutor, is a way of you being able to learn how to build a system for yourself that takes care of you and takes care of reality to the point where it puts you in a position and others to be able to go and make the changes in the system that's necessary, that without the education, you're not going to be able to do. So it's like a way of improving your local reality, then also improving your ability to then go to a higher level in the system. Because unless we have that point, like nothing can ever change. Because otherwise you just have to pray that something's going to magically change, or the people at the top are going to change it for us. But that's not going to happen, because everything is indicating they're just going to go for more and more control, and they'll just keep fighting and fighting within themselves to get to just the few who are left. That's just the game. That's the game everyone's playing. So we can't like blame them. Everyone's doing it. You would do it if it came down to a promotion between you and the guy next to you. You would do that same game. So we have to then realize, okay, those are the part of the elements that's within us that's preventing us from really getting to that point, right? What do you think, Drake?
Yeah, so I'm really glad that Mitch brought that up, because we're also talking about the future of future generations, not just our own selves and what we're thinking about society, but also about, okay, well, how do we actually prepare the future generations in a way that they're actually effective in this world? And by basically creating an environment for them where they're not being told reality and the truth and getting all the skills and tools that they need, it's actually setting them back. It actually puts us back, into, so to speak, into the dark ages, And it's funny, I mentioned this to somebody earlier this week. I said, we're going back to the Middle Ages. And he said, well, at least in the Middle Ages, they had like an apprentice, master apprentice relationship. We don't even have that today, And so we'd really be setting our society back. And that's the direction that we're heading right now, if you just look at what's going on just within education, but there's a lot more problems going on as well. But even just within that one point, it's crumbling to the point where we are regressing as a society. And we have the tool where we can change that. We can actually do better than what it was at its peak. And we can do that for adults as well. And that's really the point that we're getting at here, is that we as the adults need to be the ones, we need to be the ones who take the lead and change ourselves so that we can be the leaders for those future generations. They're looking for someone right now who they can emulate. They're looking for some kind of direction. And if you just look at, what's going on in all media forms, there's no one really saying or even considering that this is a possibility, that we can all change. We can all take responsibility. And we're showing we can do it. We're doing it for ourselves, for our own families, and for those that we interact with, right? We're looking for those who want to be a part of that. Those who want to take the responsibility themselves and be a part of the real change of this world. Not in the cliche way, but in the real way.
And the proof of that is, when have you, like Drake, Mitchell, even Cameron, when have any of you ever heard a child say, my house is like heaven?
I've never heard that. That's awesome.
It's like the OG master apprentice relationship was father and son, mother and son, mother, daughter, father, daughter, whatever the case may be. It's like we just created the microcosm of it. Not Cameron and Katie. It's like us as a species have developed to this point to show that it is possible. And you guys know the game Legend of Zelda?
Yeah.
Super ultra popular. And throughout the game, you start off with like a little sword. Maybe like I'm going back to like Ocarina of Time, right? Of like you start with your little sword. You just get the sword, and then you can start cutting stuff. And then you get the shield, and you can bounce shit back. And then you get a bigger sword. You grow older, all this stuff. And you can't beat this boss or get through this path until you get bombs. And you can blow up the bombs. And then you can go into Goron Valley. And then you get stronger and stronger. And you grow your skills, and you overcome things. Grow your skills and overcome things. Me and Maylat, we were talking about this scandal with Justin Trudeau, and it's with this organization called We Day. Mitchell, I think we talked about We Day a little bit. You heard it? Or no?
Maybe. I don't know.
Way back. But
Was he just sitting around in his apartment playing Wii all day?
Yeah, We Day.
Is that how it ties into the Ocarina of Time?
They're completely separate for now. But We Day is like just the main point that I'm extracting from it is like how they get a bunch of kids. They always like they incentivize schools to handpick certain kids to go to their events with the celebrities and stuff like that. And they want kids to feel like they can change the world. That's the basis of it.
Got it. Okay.
You ever feel like when we talk about changing the world, it's like this, like this empowering, like it's like a optimistic light kind of image in our mind,
Yeah.
right? It's like change the world. But changing the world is more like Zelda. It's more like you're fucking weak and there's a bunch of monsters and you're a pussy and you can't do anything and you have to go develop yourself in order to be able to do more. And that's one of the reasons why we appeal the hero's journey, that archetype of a story appeals so much, is because it starts off with things are so bad for the main character, and then he decides to make a change, but not really, because then he goes back, and then Luke's parents die in Star Wars or whatever the case. There's some bad thing that happens, right? And then he's like, okay, out of necessity, he has to go do it. If you guys don't see the necessity to actually stand up and make a change, open your fucking eyes. And the real point is the pursuit of happiness is total bullshit. Because we talked about it before. If you're honest with yourself, it comes and then it goes. And then you're like you're a little coke fiend. You're like, okay, shit, I'm unhappy. Like, I got to be happy again. Mitchell, what you up to today? Oh, you're busy? You're just making excuses. You don't want to hang out with me. Oh, man, all this bullshit, right? When really what we're looking for is fulfillment. And the definition of fulfillment is satisfaction or happiness that comes as the result of developing one's character and abilities. The definition of character that we talked about before is just living by principle. It's following through on a decision long after the emotion and the excitement of the decision is gone. Longevity. That's literally defining the master of this reality. There's space and time. Everybody can do stuff in space. Everybody can move themselves a bit, but what about the time? Everybody can work out once. Everybody can make one sale. But the people who are actually successful in this world are people who can do that over time. Everybody can learn one thing, but does your learning continue? That's what developing character is. It's maintaining your decisions over time and developing your abilities. Is there any other purpose in this world that you can give yourself that would develop your abilities more than if you gave yourself the purpose to change the world? Because fuck it, man, we're going to die anyways.
YOLO.
YOLO, right? It's like you can use that to just like abuse everything and be like, fuck it, we're going to die. I might as well just like jerk off all the time and drink and like fuck myself up. Or it's like, you're only going to live once. Wouldn't you want to experience the height of reality has to offer through developing yourself and what you're able to do, and the reflection of that, or the truth or reality of you being able to do more is actually changing something, actually being able to provide a life for yourself, for the people around you that they actually want, because nobody's actually happy. Not one person. There's a documentation of slave owners way back in the day. They would journal, and they would talk about their fear that one day all their slaves are going to rise up and take all their shit.
That's exactly what's
Nobody's
happening
happy
right now.
Nobody's happy. So you're going to die anyway. So why not? Come check us out at self-provided.com.
Hey, check this out. I want to end with this part. Okay. Imagine that when you die, okay, you don't just go to the end of your life and then it's like, the world's continuing the way it is. Imagine that you fast forward to the end result of the starting point of your life, like the end of the world as the starting point of that. Does that make sense? Meaning, if you take a set of logical axioms and then you carry them out to their logical conclusion.
Okay.
The end result.
Okay.
So when you die, instead of you just dying and then, okay, but here on earth, it's tomorrow, right? Okay. You die and you go to the logical conclusion of how you lived and what you accepted and what you allowed. Okay. So you go to the end of the world, right? That's either going to be everything's fucking collapsed, right? It's totally done, hell, whatever you want to call it, or it's paradise. Do you see what I mean? Because everything's either going to fall apart or it's going to get better and better and better and better. So when you say like, and you die, you know, you only live once. Yeah. Or maybe if you do what's best, you get to live again. Because it's not some magical God deciding whether you live again. It's like the result of who you are is manifesting in reality. And then reality is therefore either going to go forward or backward.
Yeah, you're nay.
Do you see what I'm saying? You are in reality affecting reality. Reality will become the consequence of your choices, of your actions, of who you are. So if you die and you didn't do everything you could to do what was best, then you'll be the result of that. Right? Or you'll be the result of you did everything that was best. Do you see what I mean? So if you want to have any kind of faith, if you need any kind of faith, just have faith that if you do what's best, everything will become what's best. Because if everyone did that, then logically wouldn't everything be best? The only thing that would hold you back would be, well, what if everyone doesn't? Well, but if you then don't, then you are the cause of it not being best, yeah? Right? So instead of YOLO, you could just think of it as FOMO, right? Do you really want to miss out on reality being what it could be? Or do you want to just be the cause of it being the way it is? Because that's how we're living right now. Right? And what we're looking for is people who, you may not feel like you know everything and you're like, okay, it all makes perfect sense, but you're like, dude, this is next level. Like, these people are talking about actually making a difference in this world and doing something that matters with their lives. And you don't have to feel superior about it. You could just be like, this is just, it's like everyone else. Everyone else is living their lives with some purpose. Do you want the purpose to be just to be here because you were here by accident and just living out a program and that's your purpose? Or do you want it to be you actually choose to do what's best and you're developing your life according to that? Because then that will be the consequence of your life. Right? So that's what we're looking for. That's why we always encourage everybody at the end to go to self-perfected.com, because that's how you can kind of connect with us and go into the Facebook group and do all that. And then also check out all the resources that we're continuously talking about.
In other words,
Anything else?
that's how you stop being just a robot, just a program. Visit those groups. That's the start of it. I'm not just like selling. Like, I mean, literally, the way in which you start deciding things for yourself is by investigating those resources.
Yeah, you can't do it on your own. So if you have any fear of being a part of a group, because then you'll lose your individuality is getting in the way. It's not real. That's the illusion. Because when you start walking this process that we're talking about, that's when you start to access your real individuality. Your only freedom right now in the moment in this world is to do what's best rather than the pre-programmed robot response of just go along with everything. That's your choice. Right. So with that, I guess we'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Sounds
and
good.
we will see everybody on the next episode. So thanks for joining us. See you next time.
Good.
Everyone.